Swing and a drive. That's hammered. The ball is gone! 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 Herrera, three-run lightning bolt. In the air, right center. That is big-time drama. Victor on the run. He's not going to get it. Clase has hit a home run. Didn't see that coming from the ninth-place hitter.
Or you can do this to left field, and it's off the base of the wall. Barger is around third. He will score. It's an RBI double for Kirk. His fourth hit of the night. It's set by Hoffman. And it's in the air to center field. It is caught by Clase, and the Blue Jays will win it.
That's what it sounded like last night on both Sportsnet, their call up there as the Blue Jays win it here in St. Louis, and FanDuel Sports Midwest. Cardinals thought they were able to pull out a victory with their come-from-behind opportunity, and then they blow the lead again.
I'm glad you finished that sentence. And then they blow.
Ryan Helsley comes into the game in the exact spot where you want him, and he's up by a run. He's got the ninth-place hitter. Blows the save. It's the third consecutive game in which Ryan Helsley has blown a save, Alex. That's the stat that you're probably going to hear from most people over the next, 24 hours or so. I think that's a little misleading. The game over the weekend that he blew, that was weird. Everything about that opportunity was strange, right? He had a 3-strikeout inning, and on one of those strikeouts, he allowed a run. So, what am I supposed to do with that, right? One of the hits literally hit the bag. That's one of the strangest situations you'll ever see. Yesterday was a little different in that regard. He gave up a home run to the 9-hole hitter. You don't want to see that. I don't think Helsley, though, has been bad. And this is where we start our conversation today, because we're going to get to everything that the Cardinals did in order to bring themselves back in that game, which is something this team just inevitably finds a way to do. What is your concern level right now, Alex, on a scale of 1 to 10 with Ryan Helsley, who has a 3.75 ERA last night now? And as I said, he has, technically speaking, blown 3 consecutive saves.
Right, like a 4, maybe a 5. I mean, it's not that I'm screaming that Ryan Helsley is a liability every time he takes the mound. I think there's plenty of other guys that have been used out of the bullpen that have fallen into that category. It is a little alarming that every time he comes out, it feels like he's giving up 2 or 3 hits. Now, in his defense, more times than not, he's getting out of those jams, which is all you can ask for a closer. But it's just definitely not the version of Ryan Helsley we saw last year. And, I mean, that version of Ryan Helsley you saw last year was unhittable. So it's hard to sustain that. So that's why I'd probably put it at a 4. When he comes out there, it just is initial feeling that it's like, okay, he's going to put runners on, but what is he going to do with it? And then he gets through it. But then there's other times where he doesn't. And that's where it kind of feels like I've fallen with Ryan Helsley. So it's not what it was when Roycroft would come out of the bullpen earlier in the season, or what Riley O'Brien was earlier in the season. That I knew the game was going to get blown up.
Sure.
But it does feel different than what it was last year. Last year, I could turn the TV off and say, this game's over.
He was unhittable last year.
Now, it feels like when he comes in, I'm talking at least 2 guys on base before he starts to get through the inning.
That's what it feels like. You know, when you're playing, what's the racing game? Mario Kart, and you've got, like, the cloak around you.
You just have to really say, what's a racing game?
And like, nothing can touch you. You can run through anything.
Yeah.
That was Ryan Helsley last year. He was invincible. There was nothing anybody could possibly do to him. And this year, he's just a good racer going through Mario Kart.
You know what? He's just Bowser. He's just Bowser, man. You're slow, but you get through it. That's all that matters.
He tends to get the job done. It's not as pretty as it was last year. He doesn't have the same swing and miss stuff as he did a year ago. It's still good. By Major League standards, Ryan Helsley has been a good reliever this season. I know that sounds strange because you're watching the blown saves right now, but he has been a good reliever by Major League standards so far this year. ERA is still below 4. Velocity is crazy high, but he's not getting the same whiff. When people make contact, it's loud contact right now. And that's always been the case at times with Helsley. Like, he throws it so hard that, hey, man, when you throw it that hard, it's
hard
going
to
to come
hit
off the bat pretty hard. But he's also walking more guys, or he at least was earlier in the season. So there are these cracks in his arsenal that did not exist a year ago. And most of that's with the fastball. The fastball doesn't have the same command as it did last year, and guys are hitting it more than they did last year. I'm not smart enough to understand why that is the case. I don't know if the tunneling's not quite the same, if he has like a tell on when the fastball is coming, so guys are sitting on it. It's tough to sit on 102, but apparently guys can do it at the major league level. It's weird. I can't totally explain it. I would say my concern level is like a 3. I just am not worried about Ryan Helsley. This could come back to bite us, absolutely, but right now, this looks like a guy that's had a couple of weird outings, and I think he's going to be fine long term. If this was something where the velocity was down to like 97, the slider looked like a shell of itself, and he was getting just like shell-shocked every time he goes out there, I'd be concerned. I'm not there, T-Bone.
I'm not either. I'm about where you are, which is a 3, I would say, because I think there should be, getting emotional, context about that blown save to the Dodgers, because you're right, it was a weird outing, right? Ohtani, when he does get a hit, it typically doesn't hit a bag. It's typically a missile off of the bat, and he gets a hit, you get the wild pitch that scores the run. He makes one mistake last night to where if you had a 2-run lead, we're not even having this conversation, right? But you only 100%. Had a 1-run lead, so there's a little context there. And to your point, sure, the fastball for some reason is getting hit this year. I can't fully explain it. It's not like the velo's down. You know, when you look at Baseball Savant, you can kind of see kind of the shape of it, right? The movement, the vertical break and all that, horizontal break, nothing's really changed. So I just think it's one of those that's just a blip on the radar for right now. And to your point on like, hey, early on, he did have kind of a walk issue. When you look at his numbers, yes, the walk rate is up compared to last year. It's also going to take a while for that to come back down because he's only walked 2 in his last, I think it's 9 outings, if I'm not mistaken.
And everything with a reliever, a small sample size theater.
Exactly. And I like, sure, he has given up some hits, and like, I can't take that away because that one is a real issue that Alex did bring up there. But for the most part, it's typically been singles, right? Last night was kind of the exception where he does give up the solo shot. So I'm at a 3. If this continues for another week or 2 and you start to see even more damage done, which I mean like crooked numbers being put up on the scoreboard, okay, then I'll start to have some concern. Right now, I'm not really there. I would say I'm at a 3. I still think he's going to figure out whatever it is that's ailing his fastball, and he's going to get back to being the elite closer that we saw last year.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can always check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. We'll be talking with Dan Shulman, one of my favorite broadcasters in the business. He does the Blue Jays games now. Previously was with ESPN doing most of their national games on Sunday Night Baseball. He's going to join us to give us the Toronto perspective on that one coming up here in a little more than 5 minutes. Alex, I don't want to focus all on the bad, though, from that game because the Cardinals found a way to come back once again. I don't know how you felt, T-Bone. You were at the game last night. Alex, we were both watching at home. As I was watching that 7th and 8th inning, I was like, all right, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think the Cardinals are going to mount some kind of a comeback here. That doesn't mean they will win, and it doesn't even mean they will tie the game or take the lead. But they're going to have some kind of a run at some point here. That's just who this team has been, right? Once they get the starter out of the game, let's see what this looks like against the bullpen. And they did exactly that. They find a way in the 8th inning to have that rally. Get a couple of singles, a walk, and then boom, the big homer by Ivan Herrera. Great call, by the way, by Chip Carey on that. He captured the moment. Great. Go up by 1 run, and you're like, okay, they did it again. This team's inevitable. Let's get Helsley in here. Let's go ahead and take this thing home. Boom, 37-29 on the season. That's great. 8 games above 500. You love to see it. What did you make of the offense finding a way to come back in this one once again, Alex?
I mean, to steal the line from Thor, they're inevitable. Not Thor, Thanos. Like that's what it is right now. Like,
you guys nailing the references.
Seriously. I made fun of him earlier, but technically mine still had the TH. I was almost there. Like in the bottom of the 8th when Victor Scott walked, I was like, okay, they're going to do something here. Because it just feels like anytime they get a base runner on, you're expecting them to do damage. The previous inning when Burleson got the double, I'm like, okay, this might be the start of it. But every single time the Cardinals put guys in with runners in scoring position, and this is how wild a difference a year makes. Because last year at this time, runners in scoring position, I was like, cool, I'll put $20 down on this being a double play to end the inning. But now, runners in scoring position, that guy's going to score, and you're going to start to see a rally. So it does feel like this offense is inevitable. And I would just be so curious from the perspective of the other team's pitcher, what it feels like now going up against this Cardinals team. Because because they've got to have the narrative now as a team in the National League that's like, man, you can never kill this opponent off. The Doug Armstrong quote, you got to jam the knife into the brain. You can't do it to this team.
Especially as you're going 2, 3, 4, 5. When you get to win Donovan, Contreras, Herrera, that's the spot of the order where you're like, oh boy,
and
hold
that's
on to your butts
when
right now.
Scott walked, I'm like, okay, cool. Here's where the damage comes in because you got Nootbaar, Wynn, Donovan, Contreras, Herrera. So yeah, it does feel like you just cannot kill this opponent off.
Yeah, I kind of accepted defeat on Barrios. Like, after, like, the third or fourth inning, I was like, okay, so they're not hitting this guy. But what happens when they go to the bullpen, right? We saw this in the Kansas City game, where it was they pulled
Cameron. Noah Cameron.
And they went to the bullpen, and you and I were in the office watching that game and said, oh, that might be a mistake. And I kind of felt that way. They pulled Barrios because his pitch count was up, so I didn't feel like they pulled him early. They went to the bullpen. I was like, okay, now that you're seeing something different, I feel a little bit better. Now, I wasn't expecting a full comeback to gain the lead. I was just like, okay, they'll probably make this interesting, not a big 4-run blow-up that leads you to getting the 4-3 lead.
And Rodriguez had allowed one inherited runner to score on the season, and then he gives up the single to Contreras. That scores a run, and then the Herrera home run, that scores 3 more. Herrera is one of those guys right now that when he comes up late in a game in a big situation, I just believe he's going to find a way to do something that's productive. Whether that be the home run like he did last night or just hit a hard-hit single, whatever it is, he's going to do the right thing in those spots. It's been a hell of a lot of fun to watch. That game last night, if Helsley found a way to pull it off, we would have been calling that one of the wins of the season for the Cardinals. And instead, it feels like such a missed opportunity because they couldn't find a way to come out on top. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we're going to get the Toronto perspective on that game from last night, what Dan Shulman thinks of this year's Cardinals. We'll talk about that next with Dan Shulman of the Blue Jays broadcast here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by Dan Shulman, one of my favorite broadcasters in the business. He's the Blue Jays play-by-play guy now. Previously, of course, you heard him with ESPN. Dan, always appreciate the time. Impressive win for the Blue Jays last night. Unfortunately, here in the St. Louis side of things, not a great one for the Cardinals. What was your impression of that game?
It's funny, and good morning, and thank you for your kind words. We went into it saying this is a really good measuring stick for both of these teams. Like, both of them may have a few more wins than maybe people on the outside expected them to have, and this is a good chance for both of these teams to say, hey, are we for real? Are we, wild card contenders, maybe division contenders? So two pretty evenly matched teams. Jose Barrios, in spite of not really having his best stuff, was getting a lot of outs and getting through the game. The Blue Jays got a couple of early runs, but then left a bunch of men on. Alejandro Kirk, who we can get to in a minute, had a big home run, big spot to make it 3-0, and then bang, bottom of the 8th inning against a part of the Blue Jays bullpen that's been really good this year in Little and Rodriguez. Herrera gives them the lead, and then maybe the unlikeliest candidate on the Blue Jay roster, Jonathan Clase, hits his first home run of the season, and he's only been in the big leagues maybe 3-4 weeks. He hasn't played all that much, and then they get it done in extra innings. So I think a lot of similarities between these two teams. I think it's a fair fight, an even matchup, and really looking forward to the next couple of games.
I do too, Dan, and looking at both, when we talked yesterday with the Cardinals insider Katie Wu about how the Cardinals are just a really good team, and I asked the question, what's it make that team to go from good from great? Kind of feels like Toronto's in that same spot. So where do you feel like Toronto is in terms of good versus great?
So I wouldn't say they're great. There are a couple of differences between them and the Cardinals in my mind. I think what both teams really have is guys. So here's what the Cardinals, I think, have a very high floor. Like, if you look at their lineup, everybody's contributing. There's no superstar in that lineup, but up and down 1 through 9, I think on any given day, pretty much anybody can hurt you. For the Blue Jays, I think it's a little bit different. They've had a lot more injuries than the Cardinals have had. I know the Cardinals have been really healthy. The Blue Jays were without Dalton Varsho for a month. He came back for 3 weeks, hit 8 homers, and then got hurt again. And he's out another week or two. And Anthony Santander, who hit 44 home runs last year for Baltimore, has either not hit or not been healthy. He's on the IL now. So, on the one hand, I look at the Blue Jays 36-30, and I say, is this real? And then on the other hand, I say, well, Varsho's coming back and Santander's coming back, and maybe they get Max Scherzer, and they're missing one of their best relievers, Yimi Garcia. He's coming back hopefully in a couple of weeks. And then the big one is Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's having a nice season, singles and doubles, but he's only got 8 home runs, and it's June 10th. And I think there is another gear for this Blue Jays team. Now, the other thing is there are some cracks in the ice. Like, if you look at the 4 and 5 spots of their rotation, it's incredibly uncertain every single time. So they're relying a ton on the big three of Barrios, Bassett, and Gausman. But the Blue Jays have shown, just like the Cardinals, I think, an ability to stay in games, to come back late in games. I think last night was the Blue Jays' 20th come-from-behind win this year, and that's second in the majors to the Dodgers. Like, the vibes couldn't be better right now. Taking 2 out of 3 from the Phillies, 2 out of 3 from the Twins, winning the first game here. I don't know if they're great, but I think they're good enough to make the playoffs this year if they keep doing what they're doing and get some injured guys back.
Just from a vibes perspective, everything you're describing sounds like you are describing the St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, it was unexpected for them to be this good. They've got some young, fun contributors, and it's all kind of gone in the right direction. The other thing that is similar about these two teams' paths, Dan, is A, really bad seasons last year, and B, a lack of playoff success for nearly a decade for both of these teams. What was the fan perspective, based on your level of gauging it, coming into this season on where people were at with the Toronto Blue Jays?
A very good question. The fans have been so let me back up. I'm not talking about the current moment. If we go back to last year, incredibly angry. And I'm not understating it, incredibly angry. Like, the Guerrero-Bichette era was supposed to be a golden era for this team. And if you go back to 2021, when they had Marcus Semien and Teoscar Hernandez and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and scored 1 billion runs, it was good times. And it's funny because they were a freight train that year. Didn't make the playoffs. Missed the playoffs by a game. Make it the next year, lose in 2. Make it the next year, lose in 2. Haven't won a playoff game. So the fans were unhappy because they thought it was going to be a golden era, and they thought the farm system was going to produce a ton of guys, and neither of those things were happening. So now go to this offseason. And now the dominant topic is, are they going to sign Guerrero? And they didn't until late, like past the deadline, past the season starting. Signing Guerrero, and whether it turns into a good deal for 14 years, none of us knows, but it perked up the spirits of the fan base a lot. And I think also in the offseason, objectively, if you look at what they did, even though the fans were angry, the ones who get it could look and say, okay, they signed Anthony Santander, that's going to help. And they signed Max Scherzer. Hopefully that's going to help. They signed Jeff Hoffman to be their closer. That has definitely helped. They traded for Andres Jimenez. Now, he's making a ton of money, but he's a great defensive second baseman, and it's their money. So if they want to spend it, let them go spend it, right? So, objectively, the team was better going into this year than they were coming out of last year. So I think fans were in a better mood. But when they were 16-20 and weren't scoring at all, because they didn't, you guys can look, they didn't score for like 5-6 weeks. And now the last 5-6 weeks, they're top 3 or 4 in the majors in everything. It's crazy. And a lot of it is Ernie Clement and Nathan Lucas and Tyler Heineman and all these guys around the edges of the roster who are given an opportunity and are playing great. You know, how sustainable is it? We'll see. But right now, the vibes are pretty good. You know, they've won. They're just like the Cardinals, 20-10 in their last 30 or whatever it is. And that's with a pretty tough schedule. Right now it's Phillies, Twins, Cardinals, Phillies again. It's going to get easier. They finish up the first half. Before the All-Star break with, I might have the wrong order here, but Angels, White Sox, Athletics. That's where, you got to go 6-3, 7-2 in that stretch, right? Keep your head above water against the good teams and then beat up on the bad teams. And their schedule is going to get a little bit lighter. And if you look at the American League, as I've said a bunch of times locally in Toronto, it's a big mushy middle right now. There are like 6 teams within 2 games of each other, and only 3 of them are going to get into the playoffs. So they just have to be a little bit better than, Cleveland, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Seattle, those kinds of teams.
Dan, the Vlad Guerrero Jr. conversation I find fascinating because we've talked a lot in St. Louis about how can teams win without a star or a superstar in the game today. You've seen a lot of baseball. Do you believe teams can win in baseball today without having a star?
I think it's hard. And it's funny, I didn't say it on the air, but one of my thoughts in watching the game last night about the Cardinals was, okay, this year's the year to decide who's part of the future, right? Who's going to be a big part of this. But I think they got to go out and get an anchor for that lineup, a 3-hitter, a 4-hitter, whatever it is, a guy who can hit 35 home runs and drive in 100. Maybe that's old style thinking because I'm 58 years old, but I think they need a dude in the middle of the lineup.
Our producer's 23 and he feels the exact same way.
Oh, good. Okay. Like I said, I think the floor is really high for the Cardinals. Like, they've got good players out there, but I do think you need a couple of great players. Now it's funny. Look at the Blue Jays. So Guerrero is the guy, the name, the star, right? Who's got the highest OPS on the team this year? George Springer. And it's not even close. Who's the most dangerous hitter on the Blue Jays right now? Alejandro Kirk, and it's not even close. He might be the most dangerous hitter in baseball right now, the way that he's been going the last 6 weeks. And he's going to be – Cal Raleigh will win the voting, but Alejandro Kirk's going to be at the All-Star game. So, I guess it's what is our definition of a star, right? And this is where I think the Cardinals have it over the Blue Jays in some areas, like 4 or 5 spots in the rotation. St. Louis is better. But where I think the Blue Jays have it over the Cardinals is whether it's Bichette, Guerrero, Kirk, Addison Barger didn't show it last night, but he's been a force lately. The Cardinals may have a higher floor, but I think the Blue Jays probably have a bit of a higher ceiling. And if you're going to beat the good teams, I think you need a couple of dudes.
Dan Shulman is our guest here on 101 ESPN. I know you have a hard out coming up here in just a minute, Dan. Real quick before we get you out of here, are you a Toronto Maple Leafs fan? I know you're from the area. Are you a Maple Leafs fan?
Ooh. I am, yeah. Like, I don't lose sleep over it, but It bothers me. Yeah. So, I mean, they've been great in the regular season. You know, it's just like, you know, you could sub out the words Guerrero Bichette and put in the words Matthews Marner, right? And here we go. So being a Toronto sports fan is a really interesting experience. And I think there will be lots of books written on the subject from a psychology point of view over the coming years. But even going into this year, I mean, they struggled to beat Ottawa in the first round, and they beat them. You know, you got to give them credit for beating them. And then Florida, there's just in the Stanley Cup playoffs, as you guys know, there's just that extra gear you need of toughness and digging deep and all that. It's not just talent. And I think the core four era is over. I don't expect Marner to be back. I don't know what they're going to do to fill out the roster, because they're going to have to use that money wisely. But again, I don't watch every game, but I do like them. They were my favorite team growing up as a kid. I remember every player in the 1970s Maple Leafs, but you know, they gotta figure out something. And Maple Leaf fans are in a giant wait and see mode. Okay, go win your division, go get 113 points in the regular season, but you know, call me in April. That's kind of where Maple Leaf fans are right now.
That makes sense. Hey, Dan, I know like 30 seconds here. Do you like John Tavares? Do you think he should be back, or is he going to be a free agent?
I would like them to bring him back. I mean, he's from the area, as you know, and he had a great year. I think he scored like 35 goals, and to me, he's got what you need on the inside. He's not as good as he was, obviously. And again, I'm no expert. I don't see every game, but you know, Matthews is Matthews, Nylander is Nylander, and I think you need Tavares there too. And even if it's in a bit of a diminishing role going, you know, you give him a 2-year deal or whatever, and does he go to the wing? Does he go to the third line? Whatever. But I think it's a good guy to have on the ice and a good guy to have in the room.
Dan told us he's got to be out by 11:30. It is 11:29:30. Dan, appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us. We'll talk with you again soon. Enjoy the ballpark this week.
All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care, Dan.
That's Dan Shulman joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate his time as always. In my opinion, one of the best broadcasters in the business. Always enjoy being able to catch up with him. Man, it is crazy, the similarities in terms of where these teams are at in their life cycles, the fan base, their approach. I would say one big difference, one key difference between the two teams. Really, two of them. One, history. Just the history of the Cardinals is a little different than the history of the Blue Jays. Two, their approach to stars. Because the Blue Jays have really tried to get one, man. I mean, they have tried like hell to land a superstar. They tried on Ohtani. He wouldn't take their money. They just can't seem to find guys that are not already there that will come to Toronto for whatever reason, and there's probably a million of them. But that is very different than the Cardinals, who don't try to go sign those superstars, right? They approach free agency very differently, and I will be curious to see if maybe we see the Blue Jays start to take a page out of the Cardinals playbook of, all right, we got to trade for our stars. And the Blue Jays become the team that go get that next Nolan Arenado. They go get the next Paul Goldschmidt, the next Scott Rowland, the next Matt Holliday, those kinds of things. But they are in very similar spots in that respect. Alex, what did you think of Shulman when he said, to him, the thing the Cardinals need to do this offseason is go get that dude in the middle of their order that hits 35 bombs, drives in 100 rounds?
That's why I asked him about the Vlad Guerrero and if you can win without a star, because he's right. This is a hard thing to do, and we know that. They've got all the complementary pieces. They just don't have the dude in the middle. And whether it's him or it's that top-tier number one starter, whatever your preference, they're missing one of those guys. I personally think you're missing that 35 home run bomb dude in the middle, because that just spreads everything out. We already feel like this lineup is lethal. Now imagine what it would do when you find that guy in the middle. But easier said than done, because these guys aren't available very often.
Yeah, I thought Dan described them perfectly, the Cardinals. Team with a very high floor, and yet I don't know what their ceiling is. And I think it can come down to them looking for that guy, right? It was one of my biggest question marks coming into the year is, who's the guy that I can write down in pen? And I'm glad me and Dan are on the same page here, of 30 to 35 homers and 100 RBIs. I just don't know if they've got that guy. I thought Contreras could potentially become that guy, and I'm not sure that he is. And I think that's the one thing that is potentially going to limit what their ceiling is. When you get to October, you can win any best of 3 series, right? We see it all the time in the regular season. Once you start to get into the best of 5s, the best of 7s, that's when you really need your star players to come out and showcase themselves and really get you over the top.
My one caveat to all of this, and I don't know, I truly don't know the answer to this, but it's possible they have that in Ivan Herrera and we just haven't seen it yet. I mean, you look at what he's doing this year. He has 7 home runs in 34 games. That's crazy. To be able to do that in that kind of a pace. I mean, you're talking about him hitting 35 home runs if he played 150 games, 150 plus games this year. And he currently has 31 ribbies in 34 games. Again, if you just want to pace that thing out, that's like 150 RBIs over the course of the season. All of that is wildly unsustainable, but it's possible they have that hitter in the middle of their order. He just doesn't currently have a position. And frankly, if you're hitting like that, I don't really care. My question long term with Herrera is the power real? Is that something that will continue to be there? Or did he go through a really hot streak and he's more of like a 20 home run hitter, which is fine. That's a really good hitter and might be a future 2 or 5 hole hitter for you. I'm just not sure necessarily that that's the superstar. Either way, you've developed somebody internally that can be a star-level hitter. We'll see if he has that superstar status that could be tied to his name. Appreciate Dan Shulman joining us as always. He's a fantastic broadcaster. He's on the call for this series on the Toronto side of things, Blue Jays versus the Cardinals. We'll get back into that series coming up in about 30 minutes. Coming up next, though, the Stanley Cup Final was on last night, Alex?
Yeah, I was watching.
There was one team that played. The other team didn't exactly show up for that one.
I think that's the team you picked.
We'll talk about the team that won and the player that continues to be the driving force behind it next year on 101 ESPN. It is time to unlock your inner champion. There's one place to do so, and that is with Victory Men's Health. Check them out today. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. They have 1 in O'Fallon, Missouri, 1 in O'Fallon, Illinois, 1 in Sunset Hills, and the location I personally go to is in Town and Country. Any of those 4 locations will give you the same great service over there, and unlocking your inner champion can mean different things for different people. For some, it means getting help with that erectile dysfunction you've been dealing with. For others, weight loss goals. It is hard to meet those weight loss goals on your own. They can help you out at Victory Men's Health. They can also check for low testosterone. They can do red light therapy programs. They've got vitamin infusions, cardiovascular testing. They've got micronutrient level testing, all kinds of stuff available for you today at Victory Men's Health. Super easy process to book that first appointment. Go online, victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and tell them how it is that they can unlock your inner champion. It's all with Victory Men's Health and online at victorymenshealth.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Toronto Blue Jays last night 5-4 in extra innings. They are back in action tonight. Game 2 of the 3-game set against Toronto. 6:45 will be first pitch. Chris Bassett will be on the mound for the Blue Jays. Miles Michaelis will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
By Sam Bennett.
So what it sounded like last night, of course, on Turner Sports, as once again, Sam Bennett comes up with a goal. He wasn't alone. It was a 6-1 parade of goals for the Florida Panthers against the Edmonton Oilers. They're now up 2-1 in this best-of-7 series. Sam Bennett now has 14 goals in 20 postseason games. 14 goals in 20 playoff games so far.
What's more
he had
impressive?
13 combined over the last 3 years in the postseason.
Finish your sentence, because I can promise you it's Bennett's 14 goals.
I was going to say, what's more impressive? The fact that he has 14 goals, or 12 of those 14 are on the road.
Yes.
Yes, all of the above.
It's
all of the above.
unbelievable what he's doing right now in the postseason. Alex, yesterday we talked about it. There's a report that came out. It sounds like Sam Bennett is likely to stay in Florida. They are prioritizing him. He would like to stay. They would like him to be back. It sure sounds like that's going to be the landing spot for him. But, man, even if they weren't to get a deal done, is it even in the range of possible at this point for the Blues to go out there and have any kind of a competitive offer that would not make you want to throw up into a basket the moment that you sign it with him?
No, because if I'm Sam Bennett, the only way I'm going elsewhere is if somebody is massively over, life-changing money from a team that's in free agency. I mean, he has scored more goals in the postseason this year than what Mitch Marner has scored in his postseason career. Think about that for a minute. And Marner's going to get $12-14 million. Sure. So Sam Bennett should get $10 million on the market from a team because they'll be desperate enough. That would make me want to throw up into a bucket like you mentioned. So, no, there's no competitive offer. I think what he's doing in this postseason right now is putting him out of the realm of possibility for the Blues. Unless the guy desperately wants to play in St. Louis, then you've got yourself a conversation.
Let's be honest.
Let's be honest indeed. We all love St. Louis here, some more than others, but
come on, man. I don't need that.
It's very you have to be talking about ties between him and a coach, ties between him and a player that would say, yeah, I'd rather play in St. Louis than go to place A, B, C, or D that's going to offer me $10 million.
Did you know Logan Couture had 14 goals in the postseason in 2019?
Yeah, with the Sharks.
14 goals and 20.
Did you know Logan
games,
Couture was supposed to be a St. Louis Blue, but they traded that draft pick away?
There you go. Braden Point did this twice. 2019 and in 2020. Zach Hyman did this last year. He had 16 goals in his playoff run last year. Alex Ovechkin had 15 in 2018. Mark Scheifele actually had 14 playoff goals for the Winnipeg Jets back in 2018. Reason I just went through that list. That's everybody that's done what Sam Bennett has done this postseason in the last decade.
And then go back through that list and think of where those players are at. Are they still on their current teams that they were on when they did that?
Almost all of them, yes.
Yeah. Those players don't leave the place that they're at because, look, I mean, you're a legend, and
actually, yes, every single one of them. Yeah.
Those are franchise different or altering players, and you're going to make incredible money where you're at. You're probably talking $7-8 million if you're Sam Bennett to stay in Florida. Is $2 million really that much of a difference for you to where you might make the playoffs there and might have that success, or you're going to have the same success that you're in right now, barring health, for the next 5 years because the roster is intact?
The only guy to do this in the last 15 years that ended up leaving was Joe Pavelski. He did this with the Sharks in 2015.
And that wasn't his decision.
14 goals in 2015, their postseason there, and he ended up not being a long-term member of the Sharks, but was there for the next 3 years.
Well, and that was because the Sharks went into rebuild mode because that team was broken. So that's Pavelski would have preferred to be a Shark for life. Those guys just don't leave when they're in this type of situation. So, yeah, I mean, I think you can put a little X next to Sam Bennett's name and say, Not going to happen. And you're starting to put a lot of those X's right now, BK. Brock Nelson, X. John Tavares, sure sounds like X.
Yeah,
Sam
there was
Bennett.
a report over on The Athletic yesterday that said the expectation is that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to keep, what's his face? Why am I blanking on his name right now?
John Tavares.
John Tavares internally.
Yeah. The center market is dwindling. Like we talked about a month ago where he said, like, we always do this where this free agent class is bad or this free agent class is probably better than what next year's is, and then it starts to dwindle real quick. You're getting into territory now where there's only going to be about 3 or 4 good centermen, and those good centermen are going to be paid like they're great centermen because those teams that are going to give him the money have to.
Pius Suter?
No.
You guys ready?
I'm not giving that guy $5.5 million.
I'm in.
That's kind of it.
Cool, man.
That's the guy.
That's the guy. It's him or Granlund. And guess what? Granlund's not really a centerman.
I don't think Granlund fits. Like, I liked Granlund as an option at the deadline because you could get him for not some kind of crazy compensation.
It's a rental.
I don't think he makes sense if you're giving him multiple years because you mentioned it, Alex. I think he's fine as a center, but it sure seems like a lot of teams would prefer him over on the wing, and just the lack of size.
Yeah.
I do think is a really big deal for the way that the Blues want to play, so I don't think he makes a whole lot of sense. Donato is an option, I suppose. Claude Giroux, if he leaves. Roslovic, maybe, if they go big game hunting and he becomes a cap casualty. Trent Frederick, I suppose. I don't watch this series, though, and feel like, hey, got to get myself some Trent Frederick.
Yeah, and I think some of this is Frederick's hurt. Some of this is the role that he's being used in. But either way, all of these guys that you get mentioned are going to be getting 2 or 3 more years than what they should be getting and $2 or $3 more million than what they should be getting. Because guess what? The Minnesota Wild that were desperate for Brock Nelson and were desperate for Sam Bennett, well, now they're going to go to Suter or going to go to Granlund and say, is this the best option for us?
Can I actually push back on that a little bit?
Sure.
I wonder if all of those teams that were desperate for those guys are now going to the trade market.
Maybe, but
that's my personal concern is now the trade market gets propped up because free agency, what remains is guys that are technically middle six centers, but they're more like third line centers or wingers, guys that will eventually be pushed over to the wing if you're able to upgrade from them. They're guys that you get to the trade deadline and you're like, man, we'd really like to upgrade over that player. Those are the guys that now remain out on the free agent market. So it makes me wonder, Alex, the players that we've been talking about as trade targets, is that where these teams pivot? Is that where you see Utah go? Is that where we see Minnesota go? Is that where we see any of these other teams that are in LA is a team that's been mentioned as a possibility for some of these centers? Do they now pivot to the trade market, and that increases the asking price? It increases the demand, which makes it less likely for the Blues to go out and get that player there.
It absolutely could, and it's probably the more likely situation, but what you just mentioned is going to go into the same line of thinking for those other teams. If Utah says, no, we're not going to go to the free agent market, we'll make a trade, well, if that team's going to make a trade with you, they're going to be asking for your best asset.
That's what I'm saying.
But if Utah's not willing to give, because Utah's trying to compete, so Utah might look at this and say, well, I'm not going to give up the guy that's supposed to help us win to get that piece. I'll just go spend money. I've got $30 million worth of cap space to spend right now.
We've got thousands of draft picks. Here's 5 of them.
But if you're a team that's given up something and the bidding war is starting and that team's coming to you that has, a top defenseman in their prospect pool, they're going to be asking for that.
Isn't Utah one of those teams?
Yeah, but
that's my concern here is like some of these teams that we're talking about that are potentially trying to get into that middle six market for their centers. They have prospects, they have draft capital, and they have money, so they can use any of those pools to be able to go acquire a player. And I think preferably they go with the money pool, right? Because it's the easiest. It's the easiest way to go if you're a team like Utah, for example. If you don't go that route, though, if those guys are not available to take your money, well, then we'll go get somebody else that already has the money as a part of their contract, and we'll use our other resources to go get them. The Blues can't necessarily compete in that regard unless they're willing to part with serious prospect capital, because they do not have the draft capital to give up at this point in time. They don't really have second or third round picks in either of the next 2 drafts. So that's where things could get really interesting for them is they may have to, quote unquote, settle in the free agent market if teams start to set their eyes on the trade market and it pushes up the asking price.
Or they don't do anything. And I think that's an option that people probably don't want to hear. Might be the option they go.
I don't think you can do that.
I don't
think that's realistic.
I don't think this team can go throw $5.5 million at a Pius Suter and think that's a good idea.
Why?
That's putting you in a handcuff situation. It's not upgrading what you've got.
I don't agree with that at all. I think it's a huge upgrade over what you had last year with Oscar Sundqvist. Ultimately, that's what you're talking about.
I disagree. Not for $5.5 million.
For 3 to 4 years? I don't think that really
I don't know if it could be more than 3 to 4 years. Some of these guys might get a lot more years because there's not much out there.
It could be. And if we have to adjust our discussions accordingly, that's cool. But 4 years, 5.5 per, why is that so different than what they did with Tyler Bozak? And the cap continues to rise. I actually think it's a better contract than what they got Tyler Bozak for.
It's not much different than that. I think you were asking for a higher ceiling for Tyler Bozak at the time.
I don't think that was realistic. Tyler Bozak was never a guy that had a high ceiling. He was a floor raiser.
I think you're asking for a higher ceiling with Pius Suter if you're paying him that type of money, and he's not going to meet it for you.
But, I mean, if you look back at Bozak, he had one season in his career prior to coming to St. Louis with more than 50 points. One. He was never going to be a guy that was going to score 50-plus points. You wanted him to be responsible defensively. The expectation was he comes in as a third-line center for you right away and just fills that role. He was 32. Come in, be responsible, be this good third-liner, win your face-offs, play well defensively, and boom, we'll be okay. We can build around that. I think that's what Suter would be expected to be. And I'm not telling you he's my top option. I don't love the idea of settling, quote-unquote, for Pius Suter, but if you have to go out there and get somebody, you could do a hell of a lot worse than that, man. That's a much better third-line center than what this team has had. And
you and I are just on different lines of thinking there, because I'm not going to give $5.5 million to a guy that at best is going to give you 30 points.
I mean, last year he had 45.
That's fine, but that was 1 year. Look at what the norm normally is for him. He's 25 to 30-point player. And he had 46 points last year, which is why teams are going to be like, oh, look, we could get more out of this.
He's also excellent defensively. And he could come in here and I don't think it is all that dissimilar from Tyler Bozak. And I would say the Tyler Bozak deal was fine. You won a Stanley Cup with him, so it worked out really well in that regard. But I would say overall, it didn't age particularly gracefully. You wanted more out of it, but that's what you do. When you get into deals like this, that is going to be the asking price. So I don't know that the Blues can be in a spot right now where they can be super picky. I think if you want to upgrade down the middle six, you're going to have to go sign a contract if you go to free agency that you're not going to love.
Yeah.
And I think if you go make a trade you go acquire a player via trade right now, I'm not sure that you're going to love the compensation that you're going to have to give up in that regard either. It's worth noting, Elliot Friedman, we talked yesterday about William Karlsson and that idea. Elliot Friedman poo-pooed all over that today on his podcast, saying essentially, hey, I've asked around the league. Everybody tells me that guy's not available. He's like, if that changes, I'd be happy to report it. But right now, everybody's saying William Karlsson is unavailable. So it's another guy we could potentially scratch off the list left and right.
I really think it's going to get to the point where you sit there and the Blues look at this and say it might just be best for us to wait and see what happens once we get into the season.
Oh, man, I think that would be a disastrous situation. He's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Questions and answers coming up next.
Alex Ferrario with you to tell you about my friends out at Rhino Shield. Whether you're a business owner and the exterior of your business needs a new look, or you own a home and you purchased it recently, or maybe you've been living in it for 10, 15 years and you know the exterior just needs a facelift. That's where you need to call Rhino Shield and use the right product on the exterior of your home, because what you're using is not paint. Paint is what you're going to get over the hardware store counter, and you're going to use it on your home, and the water, the moisture is going to wash it away after a couple of years. The UV rays beating down on it are going to deteriorate it, and you're going to be painting it again and again and again. What Rhino Shield uses is a ceramic coating that is engineered to outlast paint. It sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any paint that you're going to put on it. It's 100% waterproof. It also deflects 90% of the UV rays, which is going to save you money on your energy bills. And the biggest thing about it is it's going to last. It's all backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. I can say this because 5 years ago, I used Rhino Shield's work on the exterior of our home home, and it looks brand new today like it did 5 years ago when Darren and his team got done with the work. So give him a call today, request the estimate. Darren will come out and walk you through the whole process, and I promise you'll fall in love with the work that Rhino Shield does for your business or your home. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
Three 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Just wanted to put a cap on our conversation in the last segment. I thought Alex had a really good argument there on why the Blues should avoid some of these landmines potentially in free agency. We were talking about the free agent market, the trade market, where things could go if Tavares stays, if Bennett stays. What does that mean for the Blues? I looked this up. So in 2018, the Blues signed Tyler Bozak to a 3-year deal worth $5 million per season. The equivalent of that against the cap percentage-wise would be currently a $6 million per year AAV. And the type of player that Bozak was is basically Pius Suter. Pretty similar in that regard. Bozak was a little older, maybe a little more established, but similar in terms of the overall results. That 3-year, $6 million per year deal for Pius Suter, I think would make you uncomfortable, Alex.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I would start to wonder, is that where the Blues get themselves to? I'll be curious to see what they decide to do if the market starts to shrink on them. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 801, guys, what would the Blues have to do to trade for Jason Robertson? It feels like the Dallas Stars have put his name out there on the trade block. I think it would require you to give up Jordan Kyrou, and it's not something that I think I'm willing to do.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if it is a younger player than Kyrou? Because it sounds like they're trying to get rid of Robertson so that they can bring back Jamie Benn, they can bring back Granlund, and they have a little bit more cap flexibility.
Oh.
So, like, I think people are saying Kyrou, but, like, to them, that's more expensive. Now, just next year, it's more expensive. Beyond that, it's cheaper than what Robertson's going to be.
And next year's basically the same.
Yeah, like I think if you're Dallas, you're probably looking at it and being like, well, we want Snuggerud or a Dylan Holloway for a Robertson. And either way, I'm saying no to all of these.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it would be an intriguing move of Kyrou for Robertson because I think there's higher upside to Robertson. I mean, he's got 40-goal potential, and as much as we've talked about Kyrou as being that guy, he hasn't gotten there. But that would all require, like, Robertson has to sign an 8-year contract extension. I understand it'd be a little bit more richer. I don't think the Blues are doing that. I don't see that moving. To your point on Dallas, if they're doing all this to bring back Granlund and Ben, first off, weird. Second, they're not going to take on Kyrou then for his money.
314-399-9646 is the air covered service text line for questions and answers from the 636. Guys, the fast lane called you Bert and Ernie. What would you like to call them?
In what reference were we called Bert and Ernie?
I don't know. Didn't hear this yesterday. Can't speak to it.
We are kind of Sesame Street. What would that make T-Bone?
I'm like Elmo.
Oscar the Grouch.
The Cookie Monster, Oscar the Grouch, one of those two.
Oscar the Grouch is absolutely
I'm always
T-Bone.
so happy I could not be.
You said green's your
Oscar
favorite
the Grouch
color.
is actually probably the one. That's probably the move.
No.
Live in a trash can.
I would say Bert is probably Alex.
Oh, yeah.
I would
Bert's
be more
angry
likely
all
to
the
be
time.
Ernie.
Yeah.
That's my assumption.
Bert's miserable. That's totally mean.
Yeah. Honestly, that's not a bad. Not a bad.
I just don't know
call,
what was
man.
the reference to it. Were they making fun of us, or were they just saying that's what we remind them of?
I think it's all said affectionately. That's the way that I choose to
Okay,
imagine.
so you just choose to look at it that
Yeah.
way. Good.
I like all those guys. I have a good relationship with all those guys on the show. At least I think I do.
I like them
Maybe
too,
I
but it
don't.
sounds like they don't like us.
I don't know.
Sounds like they're calling us names.
I would.
I do love rubber duckies too, so could be Ernie. Love me some rubber duckies.
I'm trying to think of the best way to describe the fast lane. They're the.
Careful, Tone Ranger.
No, it won't be anything bad.
You trying to come up with a really good comparison?
Yeah, give me some time to think on
Mario
this.
Kart?
Yeah, that didn't go well for me. I'll be better on it. Give me some time on this. We'll try to think
It's hard with four of them.
the junk drawer.
It's not
Yeah.
a whole lot of four groups out there that you can make cultural references to.
Yeah. We'll get there. All right, 314-399-9646 is the air covered service
Four
X line.
horsemen.
I like this question from the 636. How would you react if the Blues traded Braden Shin for Kyle Connor?
I mean, I'd be excited. Like, it would suck to lose a Braden Shen because I do feel like he's a heart and soul player, but I'm getting Kyle Connor. You're very weak in the center
I was just
position
about to
now,
say,
though.
like, at first I'm like, boy, Kyle Connor, that sounds fun. And then I'm thinking about it going, well, wait a minute. Who's my second line center? 'Cause we just talked about
Holloway.
potentially going to that
I'd trade
third
a
line.
winger. If I'm getting Connor, I'm trading Kyra to go get a centerman.
That's fair.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then my team looks a lot different.
Yeah, I feel like I'd actually be like caught wanting more because I'd be like, well, I need a number 2 center now. What's next?
That would feel like you gave me like half of a sentence and it wasn't finished. And I'd be like, cool, what's the rest of this puzzle? Because you've got 9 wingers and you've only got 3 positions for them.
Yeah, at that point, you got 10 wingers.
Yeah.
Like good ones. Good ones
Like
that
really
should
good
be in the
ones.
top 6 on most
Yeah, like
teams.
Jake Neighbors is a 4th-line player on that team.
Somebody said the hangover group. I think there's some truth to that.
Oh, I could
For
definitely
the fast
see
lane?
that.
They're the guys on the hangover.
Yeah, I could totally see that one. Who's the one that gets lost up on the roof on the mattress? Marshy?
Yes.
Jamie's the one that brings roofies to the party.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, I think that checks out. Stalter seems like the guy that would lose his tooth.
He's Phil.
Yeah.
Stalter's Phil. I would consider myself to be Stu in this scenario.
But you
If we
can't
were
put
all-
you can't put yourself in their
Just, like,
group,
become-
man.
You're not an honorary
I'm an
member of the
honorary
fast
member.
lane.
You're one of those guys where people are having a discussion and you're like, yeah, I think I'm a part of that group.
Yeah, no, maybe I'm actually Alan.
You bring roofies to the party?
I guess. Trying to fit in.
No, you're Chow.
Oh, man. I jumped out of the back. Naked? Come on, man.
You get your fanny pack stolen.
314-399-9646
But of
is
course
your
it's a
coverage
satchel.
service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, what would you think about trading for Chapman? That way you have a lefty and a righty that could potentially close.
Oh, I was thinking Matt Chapman. I thought they were required
I'll
at
take
third
him.
base.
All this. if we're just talking about the baseball perspective of this, yeah, Matt Chapman, God bless it, T-Bone. Aroldis Chapman makes a lot of sense for this team. I think they could use an eighth inning guy right now.
I agree. I think Chapman would make sense. I wouldn't worry
I don't know
about
what the cost is going to be, though.
closing. It'll be pricey. Going after any kind
Cole
of open
Reagans?
arms typically is.
Yeah, your version of Cole Reagans.
TK
Roby, you willing to part with that?
Quinn Matthews.
Not willing to part with that. I'm
Yeah,
not
my
sure
answer's
really
no,
willing
by
to
the way.
part with Roby either. So
Tim Kentz.
maybe. Although I think Hintz can be like their version of Michael Walker moving forward, based on his profile.
We got a hell of a rotation.
I
man.
know. They need a bullpen arm. I agree with that. I think they need more of a right-handed arm than they do a lefty, but I'd be okay with another
I
lefty.
feel like you got like 4 lefties. Now, none of them you really trust that often, but I feel like you got like 4 lefties right now. Just use Steven Matz in that role.
Text line from the 319 says, I could see BKB and Allen getting punched by Tyson with his tone.
No,
Yeah.
BK's not a part of this. We were talking about the fast lane with 4 guys.
Text
He's
line,
a
don't
part of
let
the
him
Bert
feel a
Ernie
part of
group.
it.
Yeah. He can't insert himself
pushed
into other
myself
people's
away.
groups.
All right, coming up in about
Easy,
15
Ernie.
minutes, we'll play a game of Bet It or Forget It. But next, is Ryan Helsley the key to the Cardinals' plans at the deadline? We'll talk about it here on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, so there was a really good piece over at ESPN.com earlier today. This is from Bradford Doolittle, who wrote about what all 30 teams in Major League Baseball need to do prior to this year's trade deadline. And for the Cardinals, they wrote the following. The Cardinals should pick a lane. The Cardinals have exceeded their middling expectations and are well positioned to make a real push for the playoffs. Still, though, they're a best of 50-50 candidate to play into October. What does that mean for the kinda sorta quick rebuild that the Cardinals kinda sorta entered into over the winter? If offloading the Cardinals' tradable contingent of pitchers, especially closer Ryan Helsley, would attract plenty of attention. Going into that mode, though, becomes more difficult if St. Louis's playoff odds continue to go up from the current expectation at 42%. And even if that happens, does it put St. Louis into the adding group? ? So he's basically saying, hey, pick a lane, decide where you're going. This is something that we've been talking about a lot, Alex. It sure sounds to me, reading between the lines from John Mozeliak's comments, he would like to be put into a position where they are a buyer. In an ideal world, that's what he would like to do in his final season as the Cardinals president of baseball operations. But he mentioned the name to me that holds the key to all of this, and it's Ryan Helsley. We saw last night he came under the microscope because he blew his third straight save. There's nuance to this discussion. It's more than just that. I mean, this weekend's appearance, I think it was Saturday night when he blew it. Whatever. It was a weird one. But yesterday, he gave up the homer to the 9th place hitter in the Blue Jays order. This is a guy that had not previously hit a single pitch. He had not recorded a hit on a pitch over 97 miles per hour, and then, boom, hits the home run against Ryan Helsley. Alex, to you, is Ryan Helsley the key to what the Cardinals decide to do at this year's deadline?
And just because I want to understand the context of your question, this is meaning like they got to decide what they're doing with him before they decide what they're doing any other direction.
Take it in whatever direction you want to.
Because to me, the first question that I need to have answered is, do we believe we're in this playoff race? Like, where do they need to be to when they say we're in this playoff race? Because as of right now, you're 1.5 games out of a wild card spot that's held by the Padres, Giants, Phillies. Otherwise, you're talking about, what, 5 games behind the Cubs, 4 games behind the Cubs? What's the number, the sweet spot, if you're John Mozeliak, to say we believe we can be in the playoffs? Because when you hit that sweet spot, then you can make the decision on Ryan Helsley. And I think the decision is made. If you believe you're in a playoff spot, or you should be in a playoff spot at the end of the season, then the decision should be made of we're not trading him. I don't know what's going to change between now and the trade deadline of saying, yes, we're getting rid of Helsley or we're going to keep Ryan Helsley. To me, you're not signing him to a contract extension. That is off the table. You were either trading him or you're going into the free agency and you're going to take that option to where if he gets signed elsewhere, you take that one. So I don't know if the question that holds the key to all of this is Ryan Helsley, what are you going to do with him? I think the question is, do you believe you're going to be in a playoff spot? Because if the answer to that is no at the end of the season, then you need to trade Ryan Helsley.
Agree with that. I think there's a follow-up to that, though, because I have seen this start to bubble up on social media where people have said, no matter what, you have to trade Ryan Helsley.
I disagree.
Because some are now suggesting, Alex, you can contend without him. You have now seen him blow multiple saves this season. He has a almost 4 ERA on the season. You can find a new closer, whether that be somebody that you bring in from the outside. Maybe it's somebody that is currently in your minor league system. Maybe the Granillo guy could potentially be that. Maybe you believe in one of the current options in your bullpen can become that for you. I don't believe that personally. I don't think that would be a smart way for this team to go. I think Helsley is a big part of how this team can or would contend for a playoff spot. And if you trade that, it's not just the 9th inning that you have to cover. It's now, okay, let's say they move Phil Maton into the closer role. Then you move Jojo Romero / Steven Matz / whoever the right-handed pitcher is
Ryan
that
Fernandez.
you trust. Yeah, sure. Fernandez into that 7th inning role. You guys feeling good about that 7th inning? You feeling good about the 6th inning when you have to go to a bullpen arm there?
I don't know if I'm feeling good about the 9th inning.
Sure. My answer is no on all of it. I'm just not into that. So if you're a contender for me, you're not trading Helsley. It's just I'll get the qualifying offer pick and I'll move on because I gave myself the opportunity to contend with him. How do you feel about that part of the conversation, T-Bone?
I agree with you. I think if you're in contention, if you are where you are now, and I don't even think this is just a conversation about the division either, right? I think there's a chance the division could get away from you. I don't think you're running out of the wild card race. Right now, the Cardinals are on pace for 88 wins. Padres are on pace for 92. Like, I think you can make up that right at a deadline.
And there's also the Giants in there, and you can decide whether or not you believe in the Giants.
And I was just going off of the Padres because they're the team that's in the last wild card spot right now. So I don't think this is just about, okay, where are you compared to the Cubs? I think this is about where are you compared to the rest of the field. I think he is the piece that is the one that decides everything. Because to me, if you're selling him, you should be selling the rest of your assets. And you should just say, you know what, we are going to kick the can down the road, and we're going to see if the assets we get help us for the future. Because you guys remember this team called the Milwaukee Brewers and what they did in 2022 when they were in it and they traded away their closer and Josh Hader, thinking, hey, we've got a Devin Williams that can take on that mantle, that can become our closer. I think Joel Payams was their other setup man at that time, or Broxberger. Well, they'll move up into their role. Guess what? They fell apart down the stretch because the locker room lost faith because the front office just said, yeah, we're not really believing you guys, and it's more about capitalizing on you guys as assets than it isn't worth us investing into this team and believing you guys can get to the playoffs. They fell apart down the stretch without their closer. So I see that, and I go, that's what I think would happen to the Cardinals. If they trade Ryan Helsley, they will probably just fall out of this thing. And I get he's not been as good as he was last year. He's still an elite-level closer. To me, you hang on to him, and you buy at the trade deadline.
All right, so we got this from Hal over on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. He said the Cardinals blew it with Helsley. Trade him before his shoulder blows out. Who cares about the playoffs? We also got this from the 618. Guys, why lose a player for a pick when he arguably gets you the best return at the trade deadline? So, a couple of things on this. One, I do not believe the Cardinals blew it on Helsley. I don't. I just reject that notion. They didn't know what Helsley was going to be this year. The hope was he basically is a repeat of what he was in 2024. It's also worth noting, teams will buy on the metrics for relievers. You could have a guy that has like a 4.5 ERA at the deadline that is one of the most sought-after relievers on the market because he has a crazy good fastball velo. He gets swing and miss, and a team will buy into the notion that we can fix him. Even if they can't, we can fix him. We see a lot of stuff here that we can work with. Helsley's one of those guys. He will be somebody that, if the Cardinals end up being out of it at the deadline, will be very much sought after by other teams across the market as long as he is healthy, which is the big key here. The other thing on this, we have no idea what was being offered to them in the offseason. Teams are more prone, generally speaking, to give a significant return for a reliever at the deadline than they are in the offseason, because then the runway for that player is shorter. You know who's healthy and you know who can impact your playoff race, as opposed to a guy that can help you in April, May, and June. Most contenders don't really care all that much about April, May, and June, similar to the Florida Panthers, who just every year we get to the trade deadline and we're pushing for the playoffs. We are pushing for a title, right? That's what teams do with relievers. So I don't think they blew it with Helsley. And I think that this idea that they're going to lose him for a pick and he could get you this big return, you lose him for the pick because you're trying for the playoffs, guys. All of this is supposed to be about winning. All of this is supposed to be about trying to contend. And this notion that it's become all about like player assets and either trading this guy or not getting enough. Dude, sometimes you just have a player under contract and they walk. And the reason that you allow for them to walk is because you extracted your value with what they gave you on the baseball field. That was the value. So yes, you have to come to terms with the fact that Ryan Helsley for 3 months plus the second/third round draft pick for Helsley is worth more to you as a team and organization than whatever you would get for him at the trade deadline. That's the calculus there. You can side on the other side of things, but if you're not taking into account what he brings for you on the field, I think you're doing it completely wrong. And I think you are underselling the fact that baseball is still supposed to be about the wins and losses. And it doesn't just have to be about the player transactions. All right, I'll get off my high horse. Alex?
That was pretty nice.
That was pretty good. I was going to say congratulations. I mean, I really don't have much more to add to that. I think you said it perfectly. You risk the whole point of this season was runway for your players, correct? It was resetting the books and runway for your young
and
players.
Hopefully you win while you do it.
Yeah, but the main goal was 100%. Runway for your players. They've got the runway, and they're exceeding expectations. So isn't the goal on top of runway growth of your young players? How do you develop growth? Well, not by being a good team and then selling off assets and then the team going into the dumpster. You keep trying to trend in that direction so they have the feeling of winning baseball. So they have the feeling of playoff baseball. And then once you get to the playoffs, you say, now we know what it takes to get there and we know what it takes to win at that level. and now you take the steps forward. It's the perfect opportunity for Chaim Bloom to be taking over with this organization because it's a team that wasn't expected to be in the playoffs, got to the playoffs, and now you find the spots that you need to fill the void. But if you do the opposite direction of this team was good for 3 months, but we're selling off pieces because the point is to reset the books and get the most assets possible, well, then that team misses the playoffs. And now you don't know what to do because we had a Jekyll and Hyde season. How do you grow from there? So, to me, I was one at the beginning of the season that said, look, I think you have to explore all options. Find out what's out there for Helsley. And if somebody comes to you with a Godfather offer, accept it. I'm kind of starting to steer away from that because the whole point of this season is developing your younger players. And the best way to develop a core is to give them a taste of the playoffs and say, how do we get back here?
We got this from the 314. And T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts on this too before we get out of here. I don't think the Cardinals are in the situation as a franchise, though. We're not contending yet. The Dodgers could extract that value you're talking about, BK, and let Helsley walk hoping to win a World Series. That's not where the Cardinals are at. This continues to get back to my point on the playoffs matter. And I think that the devaluing of the playoffs, of getting to the playoffs, is something that as sports fans, and this is not a St. Louis thing, this is not me talking down to any of you specifically as sports fans, I promise you, but as sports fans, there seems to be this narrative that, hey, getting there doesn't matter anymore. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. It has value for players. It has value for Jake Neighbors to be able to get into the playoffs and see where he stacks up. It has value for Jordan Kyrou to find out, as a top 6 player, when I'm circled on the board, what do I need to do in order to have success? And then when I get my ass kicked with this huge hit, how do I respond to that, right? Those games, those opportunities have value. It would have value for Ivan Herrera to get into a game in the playoffs in that kind of an atmosphere against the best pitchers in the world, find out how you stack up. Find out what Mason Wynn looks like in those situations. Find out what it looks like for Jordan Walker, hopefully, to be in those situations for you. In a big spot late in a game, how do you prepare? How do you respond? That matters. Matters to me apparently a hell of a lot more than most people, though. T-Bone?
Yeah, no, I agree that I think it does matter, and it especially matters for, I think, this core, right? I mean, this is a young core that when you think back to when they last made the playoffs in 22, really the only young guys that I can think of that were on that roster would have been Newbar, because I think he started, if I remember correctly, and Donovan. And that was like their first year. I don't think anybody else that I can... Libby might have been like on the... Not on the roster, but there at the ballpark with the team because he was kind of up and down. Gorman, maybe. Gorman might have been a part of it too. Yeah. So like that's 3 guys of a group of young players in Mason Wynn, Jordan Walker, Alec Burleson, Victor Scott II. Liberatore is actually potentially a starter that could benefit from seeing that kind of a thing. I do think the playoffs would matter for the Cardinals. And to your point on like, hey, if you want to talk about from the ownership perspective, right, where's the value in it? Ownership cares about that too, right? That money that comes in also is going to help towards potentially getting a chance to push the books a little bit further in the next season. Teams that go on deep runs that are in kind of this size of market. Look at Arizona. Arizona's not pushing if they don't get to the World Series in 2023. And I'm not saying that the Cardinals have to get to that spot, but I think it matters for the players, for ownership. I think it gives Ali Marmol a chance to really potentially turn what the kind of narrative is around him, because I think Ali is a good manager. I think he had one bad series against Philadelphia and what was just one series of 2 games, right? We saw Mike Schilt make a interesting pitching decision in that Dodgers game, but everybody talked about Schilt as being a manager. That was a manager of the year candidate and they shouldn't have let go of. So I do agree with you. I think that kind of stuff matters. I think this is a team that you should invest in. I would not move Ryan Helsley at this year's deadline.
Yeah, I wouldn't unless something changes. Like if you end up, 10 games back in the division, you're 5 games back in the Wild, something like that. If you're way, way back, okay, yeah, the calculus has changed. The situation has changed. But if it's a similar spot to where you're at right now, where you're still right there with the division and you're still 2 games back and you're the top wild card contender, not currently in the playoffs, that's a scenario where I do think you should continue to invest. You don't have to get stupid. Don't go out there and trade, Quinn Matthews. Don't go trade J.J. Weatherholt for something that is like a 1-year situation, 1-year rental. That's crazy. But go out there and be smart. Go make a move that can help you for this year. Maybe it helps you for beyond this season as well. And see where you end up. See what that looks like for you. And then you still get that draft pick compensation in return for Ryan Helsley in the offseason as well. Coming up in 15 minutes, what should be the number 1 priority for the Blues this offseason? But next, better to forget it here in BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. Do want to respond to one quick text wrapping up our finals or our last segment before we start this. If you
Something
pass
stuck
up on
in his
top
crawl.
prospects for an additional half season of Helsley, how is that different than giving up top prospects for a half season of somebody else to help the playoff push? Two key differences here. One, you're still getting a return on Helsley after the season. You get the draft pick. Two, you would be giving up 6 years of control over those top prospects for half a season of whoever it is that you traded for. You are giving up, in this scenario, half a season of Helsley. So the control is vastly different in those two scenarios. All right, guys, bet it or forget it. We will see a Cardinal hit at least 25 home runs this season. I feel like I've asked this a number of
I was gonna
times.
say,
We've
we've
kind of
done this.
swapped our
I wanna say forget
answers
this.
on this. Do you think Herrera is starting to change your tune on that after last night's home run? He's at 7 on the season.
No, because I think you have to go on a pretty significant consistency run with it, and I don't think that's going to showcase. I'm not sure the power is there to be a 25-plus home run hitter. I think you're somewhere between 20 and 23. So almost, but not there.
I think I would forget this as well. I don't think they're going to have a guy get to 25. I thought maybe Contreras might be able to get there at the beginning. Would get there at the beginning of the year. I'm a little skeptical of that now because he's just not hitting for home run power, which I find a little odd. And I still would ballpark Herrera in that more 20 to kind of what you said, 20 to 23, not get there towards 25 plus.
Next year, I think he gets there.
I'm going to say bet it. I think he ends up getting to 25. I don't think he gets to 35. That's crazy. But 25, I think, is very much in
Who
play.
said 35?
What do you got for us, Alex?
Who said 35?
Oh, we were talking earlier about the 35
the middle of the
and
order.
100
Okay, I
home run.
gotcha. Do you think he gets there at some point in his career, though?
Probably
Because
not.
that's the question we're really asking.
I would personally say no, but
Do you think
I
30?
hope that he can potentially get there. I think he's got more pop in his bat than we think.
If he can be 3,100
a lot of
RBI.
doubles, but I don't know, man.
Man, if you
He
could
is
be,
built like a tank.
I was going to say, if you could be 30 home runs with a lot of doubles and 100 RBI, that's the middle of the order bat we're talking about. Better to forget it, guys. Brad Marchand is starting to intrigue you this offseason.
Not for this team. I don't think he makes sense given the context of the roster. But yeah, if I was a team that needed a winger, he'd be a guy that I'd be targeting.
Would you sign him and trade one of your wingers for a centerman? Because, I mean, he's 37, so you only got probably a couple years left of him.
I wouldn't, because he's
Given
going
where
to
they're
get
at now.
huge money.
They've scored
He's going to get like $8 million.
Yeah, the Panthers have scored 13 goals in the Stanley Cup final, and Brad Marchand has scored 4 of them. Marchand and Bennett have scored 8 of the 13 goals that the Panthers have scored in the Stanley Cup final right now. I'm forgetting this one as well, but man, Brad Marchand is always a player that you can count on him getting you 60 points, 25 goals, and then being a playoff performer.
Yeah,
It's nice to have certainty.
I would forget that as well. Guys, bet it or forget it. It will require 92-plus wins to get into the playoffs this year in the NL.
Bet
Bet
it.
it.
I think that's the threshold. 90 is, if you said it any higher, I would have said potentially forget it, but I think 90 is the number.
Yeah, I think like 94 is probably where it's going to be.
That's the minimum?
Yeah. I mean, you said earlier Padres are on pace for 92, and my guess is they get hot down the stretch at some point to make it competitive because they're in a division that's fighting with the Giants and Dodgers. I think you're going to have to, if you want wild card, it's going to be 94. I don't know what the NL Central is going to be.
That last spot is where I think it gets to 90. I think the Phillies and the Padres will end up above that threshold, but the Giants, Cardinals, Brewers, Reds, Diamondbacks, all those teams that are currently in that mix for that third spot, I'm not sure any of those are necessarily more than a 90-win team. But I might be too low on the Giants. They've been really good this year.
Yeah, I would bet this as well. I think it's going to take 90-plus. Probably 92 is probably about where it's going to be. Like, I think that's going to be about the mark that the Padres are at. I will say this. I actually think this is probably, I don't know if it's good for the Cardinals because, I mean, that is a lot to win for even the third wild card spot. I do think it's good for baseball, right? Because if these teams keep up at this pace, it's going to be really hard for the Braves to convince themselves of, hey, we should be a buyer. The Diamondbacks, it's going to be hard to convince themselves that they should be a buyer. Like, this NL might create those sellers that we've been talking about. I mean, Dan Shulman mentioned, boy, the AL's kind of in the muddy middle right now, and that's going to leave some teams just kind of, okay, do we just kind of stand pat? Do we maybe try marginal buying? I think it's best case scenario that you get two teams like the Diamondbacks and Braves that kind of fall out of this because of it.
Okay, let's go to this one real quick. 314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service text line. Guys, bet it or forget it. This Braves era will be considered a failure when all is said and done.
Oh, bet it.
They won the World Series in 21.
Without Ronald Acuna Jr., by the way.
Yeah.
And was Strider there at that point? He was, right? I'm remembering that correctly.
I think he was.
Who was? I think they had a pitcher that got hurt, but I can't recall who it was. At
That
this
was
point.
Fried, wasn't it?
Fried was there.
That might have been
was
who
not
got hurt.
Strider was not there.
Oh.
I thought Fried was hurt. Yeah, forget it. When you gave out all those contract extensions for all of those guys, Riley, Acuna, Ozzie Albies, you've got the first baseman, and then you make the trade for Chris Sale, and you have all this pitching development, and you have one World Series win, and they were only in the World Series once, correct?
Yeah, they didn't get back.
Yeah, that's a failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would bet it would be a failure. I mean, you
Feels very
locked in
Cubsy.
that core. Yeah. But this is like the core is locked in, right? Like now you're kind of figuring out what you do. At least the Cubs kind of moved on from it. And like there were some people questioning if they should. I mean, you look back at that, it looks like they made the right call, right? Rizzo didn't have much longer left in his career. Baez has been a disappointment in Detroit, and Chris Bryant can't stay healthy. Yeah, so I would bet this. I would say it'd be a massive disappointment.
Better to forget it from the 314. The UFL will survive beyond next season. They say the reliance on St. Louis seems to be the only thing keeping the league afloat. I do agree with that.
I say forget it. I don't know how much longer it's going to survive.
Yeah.
I think you kind of saw at that conference championship game, there were not a lot of people there. And for how crazy Battlehawks fans have been in St. Louis, to not be there for a playoff game like that, I think you're starting to see that dwindle.
Yeah, I would believe this. I can see where the UFL doesn't make it past next year. I mean, even the numbers, and like St. Louis is doing its part. I agree with that part of the text. The attendance, I think, was down. I think viewership was down even here in the St. Louis area.
I think it's gone after next year. I think next year will potentially be the final season. I hope that's not the case. I think it's good for football to have a spring league, whether that is in the shape of the XFL, the UFL, USFL, whatever it becomes. I think it is good for there to be a spring league. I think at times we try to make the spring league into something that it's not. It is effectively the Arizona Fall League. That for football. That's what this is. This is guys that are all trying to get that one last shot. And if they end up with 5 players on an NFL team next year, that should be considered a pretty damn good success for this kind of a league. But I think sometimes it's asked to be something that it's not. And I don't know how you make that model work unless you are getting some kind of influx of money from the NFL. It's got to be a partnership between the two sides, and I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't think it can work, and that's my big. I disagree. I don't think you need a spring football league. I just don't see the point of it. It's clear it's too hard to have success with it outside of a market in St. Louis that doesn't have a team. I don't see the point of spring football.
He's T-Bone, that's Alex, I'm BK. Coming up next, what should be the number one priority for the Blues this offseason? It's a question that was asked in Jeremy Rutherford's piece earlier today. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Blue Jays last night in extra innings 5-4. They are back in action tonight. Game 2 of their 3-game set with Toronto. 6:45 will be first pitch. Chris Bassett will be on the mound for the Blue Jays. Miles Michaelis will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Congratulations to Jacob Misarowski. I believe I pronounced that correctly. He's the top prospect in the Brewers system. He is a 6'7" pitcher that has been clocked throwing 103 miles per hour. He is going to make his big league debut on Thursday, I believe it is, going up against the St. Louis Cardinals. So the Cardinals going to see another big-time prospect making their debut against them. This one will be at home for the Brewers. He'll be entering their rotation. He's 6'7", 200 pounds, throws 100-plus miles per hour. He's a top 25 prospect in some reports in Major League Baseball. He also happens to be from my hometown in Blue Springs, Missouri, so congratulations to him.
Now we're a Brewers program and promoting Kansas City still.
Looking forward to his debut, though. We'll see what the Cardinals can do against them. Alex, what is the Blues' #1 offseason priority? That's the question that was asked over on The Athletic just the other day on Jeremy Rutherford's piece. If you want to be a part of this, he's got this fan survey going on right now. He's going to write about it tomorrow, but he is asking for as many people as possible to get their responses in prior to that, so go take the survey over there at The Athletic. He said, what should the Blues' #1 priority be this offseason? He gave 4 different options. I'm curious which one you would side with. Option 1, re-signing Holloway and Broberg to extensions. Option 2, exploring a Kyrou trade before his no-trade clause kicks in on July 1st. Option 3, signing or trading for a top 6 forward, preferably a center. Or Option 4, trading one or both of Falk and Leddy. Which one of those would you prioritize, Alex?
Mine's the top 6 forward. And really, I would change that a little bit and just say a middle 6 centerman. That's priority #1 because all of those other ones... you can explore a Kyrou trade all you want. I think you know what's out there, and the return's not going to meet what Jordan Kyrou is. And I'm not worried about the Holloway and Broberg extension, and I don't think there's any reason to explore Leddy or Falk trades because you're probably paying to get rid of those guys. So the only priority it really feels like is finding a middle 6 centerman for this team, preferably somebody who could play in the second center role for you for a year, maybe 2, but mainly a guy that is an upgrade over Oscar Sundqvist that fits into that third-line centerman role. Offensive-minded player who can provide defense as well. I think that's the priority for this Blues team in finding that piece.
T-Bone?
I think it is a middle 6 centerman is the one that I would say there because I just don't think you can come back into next season and have Oscar Sundqvist as your third-line center. And that's not a shot against Oscar Sundqvist. He can fit into your lineup. But he was playing up in a role that he shouldn't have been probably most of the season last year. And you can see that. And you saw it, but at the end of the year last year, his body was starting to wear down on him. So the Blues were trying to avoid having him play in back-to-back games. I think that's clearly the #1 priority for the St. Louis Blues. I think it would be a failure if they don't find a way to acquire somebody to slide into their top 9 to be one of those middle 6 centermen this offseason.
That's where I'm at as well. Alex, do you feel that way?
What's that?
Do you feel like it would be a failure for the Blues this offseason if they do not add a top 9 forward?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't think it's a failure at all. I think we want to upgrade over Oscar Sundqvist because you saw the pitfalls of what he was towards the end of that season, and there was a lot of wear and tear on his body, and they used him in a certain way. But I don't see it to be a failure to bring back the same roster and have a full season under Jim Montgomery. We saw what that looked like in half of a season with Jim Montgomery. Now you get a full training camp with working with these players. You do have some options that can fill in if you need be from the minor leagues. I think if anything, you put yourself in the position where you have to outperform what you did last year, but that puts more pressure on the players that were here and what the expectations are for this team moving forward. Because think about it, the first quarter of the season before Jim Montgomery was here, Buchnevich was a shell of himself. Holloway was a shell of himself. Bolduc was a shell of himself. You didn't have 3-4 of your top 12 forwards playing to the level that you saw in the second half under Jim Montgomery. Now give them a full season to work with them. I don't think it's a failure at all.
Man,
It's a failure if you don't upgrade the roster and you miss the playoffs. you look back and you say, man, you missed an opportunity. But I think you're looking more at the roster you have in place.
That's judging the results, though. And like, I'm judging the process here in front. If you don't upgrade this roster and you look at what's happening around you in the Western Conference, I think it's going to be very difficult to just immediately repeat what you did from a year ago. In terms of the overall successes, right? You're always trying to get better. And yes, some of that improvement is going to come from Jimmy Snuggerud being around for an entire season. And they're hoping for some of these young guys to take that next step and hopefully a better year out of Pavel Buchnevich. But there's no guarantee of any of those things. There's no guarantee that your goalies stay as healthy as they did a year ago. And in that situation, then what does that mean for the rest of your roster? It's all of this stuff. So failure feels like a strong word for what we're talking about here, but I don't really know another one. It would definitely be disappointing to me if you leave this offseason and you did not upgrade from Oskar Sundqvist in that third-line center role. I think that's about as close as you can get to a failure without having seen the offers out there. And that's where I will give myself a little bit of an out here. If Pius Suter gets $7 million instead of $5 million, and it's a 4-year deal, okay, yeah, I'm good. I don't need that. If you're going to see guys that are traded via the center market that do go for like first-round picks plus, like the Blues would have had to offer their first-round pick and one of their top prospects for these guys that we would have been interested in. Okay, well, don't really think that you wanted to do that either. That's where things get tough for me. But beyond that, and I don't think all of those are going to happen, this team needs to upgrade from Oskar Sundqvist. That should be the stated goal going into day one of the offseason is how do we improve our third-line center? What do we need to do in order to get that player here as soon as humanly possible?
And going back to what Army said with, I think, both you guys and when he spoke to the media at the end of the season, I just don't know how you get the roster to be 5% better as an entire unit if you don't upgrade that spot. Because then you are asking for multiple guys to both just, A, live up to what expectations were, plus give you another 5%. And as we ran through it, I don't know how many guys on the roster you can reasonably expect a significant 5% increase from them. Booch, I would agree with. But like if Holloway didn't take another step forward, I don't know if that'd be a disappointment. Like I would say, okay, well then he just kind of settled in as a second-line center. I think the spot that you can easily just kind of circle as, hey, where can I get a 5% increase would be that third-line center position. And that's why, to me, it would be, and again, it is fair to say, okay, well, we got to see what the contracts are that are signed and see who ends up getting traded first. But I still would lean towards, hey, it would become a failure of an offseason if you don't find a way to make that upgrade.
It worries me to look at it that way because I feel like Nashville exited the offseason saying we've made our team better last year, and it was a failure of a season.
But we're not saying, though, that you need to go get a superstar,
No.
or that you should sign some crazy, ridiculous, like 8-year contracts or anything like that. You just have to upgrade your third-line center. That's like saying for the Cardinals, like, hey, a couple of years ago, if you don't exit this offseason with a 4 or a 5 starter, like you did not do your job and you're losing the innings. The 2 years ago, this is what the Cardinals did, right? They went into the offseason, they didn't add enough pitching because they were like, we go 6 deep. We feel really good about it. No, you don't. You didn't go 6 deep, and ultimately, you didn't have the innings to be able to cover for the season. If the Blues were to lose a center, if one went down due to injury, and they just run it back next year, what do you do? I think this is part of it, is I don't know that you have anybody that can be a replacement there. I guess you move Holloway over, but now you change the complexion of that second line. You could push Dvorsky, but it sure doesn't seem like that's something that the Blues would like to do in a best-case scenario. I think they really need to add somebody that can be that middle six center for them for that reason as well, to add to the depth.
Yeah, I mean, they do. They need to, I mean, even in Doug's press conference, he said, we're looking for a 200-foot offensive weapon that can play into our core group of players. So, like, that's the player you're looking for. It's just so hard to look at it and say it's a failure when you don't see what the results were, because sometimes nobody was out there and the price to acquire something was just too outrageous. And the best path for the team's long-term vision is to not go crazy and try and upgrade the team right now. Be patient with it a little bit and see what happens.
But I guess maybe where we go into our separate directions here is that, like, what does it mean to get crazy? I don't think signing a guy for a 3-year deal, $5 million per year, that's like a solid middle six center, I don't think that's crazy anymore. I think that's the going rate. And if you're not willing to do that for a player this offseason, I don't know that there's going to be many alternatives for you. Like in the future, these prices are not going down. They will be going up. Yeah. And I think part of this is sticker shock. And part of it is because the cap is going up for the first time in a while. Like we've been at this static rate really for the last 5 years since COVID started with the
by a
NHL.
significant margin, too.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is even middle six players are getting paid 5, 6. Like you'll see a middle six center this offseason, I would bet, that gets a deal similar to what Braden Shin has. And that player will not be as good as Braden Shin is. And that will be a statement in favor of the contracts that the Blues already have on the books. And it's why the Blues did those longer-term deals with these guys at the time, was because eventually you expect them to age well. That's the Kyrou deal. That's the Thomas deal as well. That's part of the Parayko consideration. But because the cap stayed flat, they didn't foresee, a pandemic taking place that would alter the course of the next 5 years. It changed some things. So I think that's a big part of this is the money's going up, and it's going to start feeling like the NBA to a degree, where NBA players, bench guys, will get paid, and you're like, hold on, I've never heard of that guy. He just got $18 million a year to be the 7th player in the rotation? I don't understand. I think there's some of that going on here as well. Alex, can I get one other thing from you real quick before we get to the other side and go to the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario? Daily Faceoff has a new piece that's out with Frank Saravalli, and it's about buyout candidates across the NHL.
Ooh, those are fun.
TJ Brody with the Chicago Blackhawks.
Bleep no.
Matt Dumba with the Dallas Stars.
Bleep no.
There's like 5 Blackhawks on here. Justin Hall, who we talked about previously.
A lot of defensemen right now.
For the Detroit Red Wings. There is one blue on this list. Do you have any guesses on who the blue is that's on the list?
What?
Oh, current blue. I thought you meant former blue. Sorry.
It's like, what?
I thought you meant former blue.
You're good, man.
It's either Texier or Joseph.
Matthew Joseph is the candidate. They said, let's preface this by saying that GM Doug Armstrong loathes buyouts. Most managers do, and the Blues may not have a significant cap crunch, so this might not be necessary and easier to grin and bear through for another year. But if Army is scrounging around under the couch cushions for more cash, Joseph is an avenue to free up a few nickels today. His production was just 4 goals, 10 assists, and that's not commensurate with his current cap hit of $3 million. They could save a little over $2 million on next season cap by buying him out. Alex, we've talked about this a couple of times, or at least referenced it, the possibility of buying out a player on this roster. Is that something you think the Blues are likely to do? Is it something you think the Blues need to do? Because I would say no to both of those questions.
Yeah, I would say no to both. I mean, I think if you're going to buy out one, it would be Texier before Joseph, because it saves you $1.75 million for this upcoming season, and the cap hit doesn't strap you significantly moving forward. I don't think you need to do that, though, unless you're talking about needing $10+ million or $11 million to spend, and they're not in a position where they need that. Now, their other piece by Daily Faceoff I saw was RFA offer sheet options, and somebody brought up Joel Hofer and said, like, you could go in there and offer them $4.5 million to Hofer, and if he signs it, the Blues are not going to want to pay that to a goalie. You might get into a position where if an offer sheet happens to Hofer, you've got to have more money to make things work. So I just don't think it's necessary right now, because you're not diving into the top of the free agent market, and unless you're making $11
million to spend.
Yeah, and unless you're making some type of big trade and bringing somebody in who's making $8+ million, I think you're probably looking at one of those two guys being in the minor leagues rather than buying them out.
I think they're more likely to go through waivers. Yeah. I think they're much more likely to push these guys through waivers than they are to buy anybody out. I don't think it's something that Army wants to do. He can literally, for one more year, if you don't buy anybody out, you can say, in my career with the Blues, I never bought a player out.
I threatened
never
it.
once had to do it. Yeah, threatened it.
I threatened it. I never did it.
But he never once had to do it ultimately, and he could, you just send him through the waivers. And there's probably going to be a team out there that takes a chance on Joseph, and even if you don't, you go down to the minor leagues. The bigger thing here is not the cap, it's the roster spot. I don't think the Blues are in a spot where they need to go out there and do something like this. If they were to buy out Matthew Joseph, it would be a sign to me this team's doing something big. If we get that news first, if that is the first in a series of dominoes that is to fall. So I don't think it's something that the Blues are likely to do. I don't think it's something the Blues need to do.
That would still be a win, too, because remember, the Blues got a 3rd-round draft pick with Matthew Joseph.
Yeah.
They got a 3rd-round pick with him because Ottawa was trying to get out of it.
He's Alex T-Bone on BK. Junk Drawer coming up next. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. T-Bone, I've got a story for you that I think you could relate to more than just about anybody in this room.
Okay.
A runner attempted to complete an absurd marathon challenge.
I'm already thinking, I can't, but
yeah, you're wrong.
Viral runner recently had the wild idea to not only run a marathon, but to do so while drinking a beer after every mile that he completed.
I can't.
Needless to say, it wasn't exactly the smartest concept and an even more difficult one to accomplish. Preston Lopez is his name. He competed in the San Diego Marathon, where he challenged himself to drink a beer for every mile that he ran. He admitted he did not account for all of the foam that he would experience while drinking them.
That's true. That is a problem.
How do you not account for that?
While Lopez did not manage to drink all 26 beers like he intended, the long-distance runner did finish the race in just under 6 hours without any sort of training time, according to his claims. He is a TikTok influencer, has more than 100,000 followers over there. He's hoping to do more challenges like this in the future.
That's like when Michael Scott was like, I need a carb load before I run.
So he was literally running while drinking. So he was like on the race, grabbing the beer, taking some sips, etc.
So he wouldn't stop? Oh.
Nope. He continued to move while drinking the beer, and that's the foam that he was talking about that became a problem. He was stopping at places on the race, like on the side, to go buy the beers while he was
How
going.
does nobody have it? Like,
great.
Does nobody buy it for him to give it to him while he's running?
Yeah, seriously.
Wasting time.
That sounds awful.
That sounds like
I've done the mile one where you did it every quarter mile. That was terrible. And I can't imagine trying to run and drink it, mostly because you jerks made me run up hills. But
no, we didn't make you. You decided to do that.
I don't think that's true. But the other problem is like when I would stop to have to chug my beer, I couldn't breathe because I'm out of shape. So I'm like gasping for air while I'm trying to also chug a beer and then run again.
Every once in a while, that video pops up of just T-Bone
I wonder if he became a fountain like me. Yeah.
Oh, man.
He probably did.
When was the last time a viral idea was a good idea?
Not many of them.
They don't typically go, well, what is a man? I'm going to go viral for this.
One of the problems with TikTok, get on my old man yells at the cloud thing here, everybody has now become jackass.
Yeah.
That's basically what.
And nobody can actually be jackass because that was funny in its time. Now you're just copycatting it.
He's Alex, this is T-Bone on BK. NFL quick hitters in 15 minutes. Coming up next, the Cardinals ultimately came to the right situation, even if the process was a little different than what we would have liked. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So, Alex, yesterday, it was honestly a pretty good start, all things considered, for Andre Pallante. This is a good lineup that he was going up against. The Toronto Blue Jays have been wildly successful offensively, really, for the last month and a half or so. And it was a weird start. Like, literally, the beginning of the game, the first couple of innings were not good for Pallante. I texted the two of you and said, oh, boy. It's a problem that the Cardinals have already sent down Michael McGreevy because you might want him to have that next start for Pallante. And then he was able to right the ship. Only one walk yesterday. Huge number for him. He had been walking way too many batters recently. Did give up the 7 hits, most of those in the first couple of innings. Ends up giving you 6 innings, 2 earned runs. I would sign up for that every day of the week from Andre Pallante. That is a great start from your number 5 starter. So he found a way through it, and now, if they had yesterday kept McGreevy up and did what we all talked about, where keep him up, let's see where you're at, and at the end of the game you can determine what the next plan of action is, I would be saying today it's probably time to send down McGreevy. So they got to the same conclusion that I would have recommended. They went about it a little bit differently by bringing up those 2 bullpen arms yesterday. They did not need either of them, or they did need O'Brien. They did not need Roycroft, the spot that would have been potentially for McGreevy. But what did you think of Pallante's start yesterday, Alex? And now that we have seen it, how do you feel about Pallante sticking up, McGreevy being the one that goes back down?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't like the decision of McGreevy going down. I still think it should have been an internal competition. But, I mean, it was a good start by Pallante. And, I mean, that's kind of what we've come to expect with Andre Pallante, where it looks rough, he works himself out of it, and then settles in and gives the Cardinals 6 innings of solid work. And that's what he's at right now. He's a really good piece to have as your 4 or 5. I would have liked to seen an internal competition and an extended run like they talked about with McGreevy, but I understand it because you guys were talking about it in the office. They have used a lot of bullpen arms over the last couple of days, and you are going to need that bullpen not outworked, because for a guy like Ryan Helsley, who, if you want to call it struggle, not struggle, whatever it might be, you don't want to overuse these guys. You don't want to overuse Phil Maton. So, yeah, you're going to need some arms in there, and we're going to probably see Fernandez at some point. It's probably why the Roycroft thing was there, because Fernandez had just pitched. But I don't like the decision. I'd like to see a little bit more McGreevy, but I understand why the Cardinals are doing it, and frankly, it's probably the better decision.
Yeah, I don't mind what they decided to do with Michael McGreevy. I probably would have personally, as we said yesterday, waited to see what the results were from the Pallante start. But, I mean, he pitched well. So I was a little surprised they were willing to send him down so fast, because I thought they'd want to stick with the 6-man until they got to the off day. And instead they've decided to go short on 2 of the guys' starts coming up here, where they'll just be on a typical 4 days rest. I think it's fine. And I also still think that this can still be viewed as a competition, right? Now, Pallante's going to get a little bit more of a sample size because of this, but McGreevy's going to get another start, it sounds like. It sounds like he's probably going to get a start against the Cubs. And if he pitches well in that game and you see Pallante struggle over the next, 2 or 3, then I think maybe you can make that move. But I think it's probably best to go with 2 extra bullpen arms, bring up 2 fresh bullpen arms. I thought maybe they could get through it with 7. You know, my old man self remembers the days of 7 bullpen arms. But I think it's smarter when you have 8, might as well utilize 8 bullpen arms.
All right, the part that we don't understand, though, is this Ryan Vilade situation, man. And it's not just him. He's the face of it, but it's really the bench in general. Mo was on with MLB Network Radio on Sunday, and he was asked about, well, hey, what would you guys like to add at the trade deadline? And he was like, listen, we got a while before we get to the deadline. However, you look at our bench right now, and I think that's a place where we could upgrade. Agreed. Full agree. I think we may disagree on how you go about doing that. I don't think you have to wait until July 31st to do so. But whether it's Ryan Vilade and his spot on the roster, or Barrero and his current place on this roster, or the way that they're utilizing Gorman in a very strict platoon right now with Ryan Vilade specifically, and their lack of usage of Pozo, all of it is just a little bit confusing. And I'm not even necessarily being critical right now of Ollie Marmol. I think his usage of these guys is probably what you would have to do if these are the options that are available to you. It's more a criticism of who are the options that are available and why is there not some kind of a refresh to the bench that's taking place. You look at it, Ryan Vilade is just not producing for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's been put into positions where he should be producing. He's going exclusively against left-handed pitchers. They've put him into the right positions to succeed, and he is not getting the job done. He's hitting .077 with a 200 on-base percentage and does not have an extra base hit just yet. And he's getting a decent amount of opportunities because they've gone into a crazy stretch of left-handed pitchers that they're going up against. Jordan Walker was officially placed on the IL on May 31st. I can't do the retroactive date because he was still on the roster before then. So May 31st was when he was placed on the IL. Since that date, no team in Major League Baseball has faced more lefties than the Cardinals have. Not a single one of them. And that's not just starters. That's plate appearances. So it includes bullpen arms because teams are attacking this lineup with left-handed pitchers. That means a lot of opportunity for whoever that right-handed bat is off of the bench. It also means a lot of opportunities potentially for pinch hitting situations beyond just that guy. The Cardinals came into yesterday slashing 205, 298, and 305 in those 150 plate appearances versus left-handed pitchers since May 31st. 205 is their batting average, and they're not hitting for any power whatsoever. They have got to do a refresh on this, man. I know they're opposed to this whole Thomas to JC thing being up at the big league level. I don't understand it. I think that they are, like, if you're waiting for an opportunity for him to play every day, I don't know when or how that opportunity comes. I really don't. Your current situation is already blocking him, and JJ Weatherholtz will be here sooner rather than later. I'm talking about like next year. So where's the spot for him? I don't get it. Eventually, he's going to have to be comfortable in this type of a role, a super utility role where you're playing against a lot of lefties. The other thing here, Alex, is you have a guy down at the minor league level right now in Luken Baker who does not hit righties well, but he does hit lefties extremely well. And if you're not going to use Barrero, or if this is the production that you're getting from Ryan Vilade, at a certain point in time, you have to say flexibility be damned with the roster, like the positional side of things. We just need a guy that can hit and will figure everything else out. Brendan Donovan allows us that flexibility. Nolan Gorman allows us that flexibility on the infield. Alec Burleson allows us that flexibility. We need a guy that can rake, and Luken Baker has to be one of those options, in my opinion, that they go to. They've got to do something here.
Both of those options are absolutely correct. Like, those two guys, one of those two should be on this team because of these situations you're in. Like, both Sajaci and Baker don't have an everyday role on this team now or maybe in the future. So make them the priority of being the role that you need them for right now, off of the bench in pinch hit situations. The other thing that I mean, why are we not just putting Nolan Gorman in these spots? Like, I get it. It's a lefty, and he can't hit lefties. Do you guys know what Ryan Vilade is hitting against lefties so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been bad.
He's 0 for 9. Yeah. You know what Gorman's doing? He's got 4 hits and 14 at-bats. So I know he doesn't hit lefties, and I know Vilade is a righty against a lefty, but we're back to the runway conversation. I don't need to see what Vilade does. If he's not going to be impactful for you, which he has not shown you any ability to be impactful, why not just use Gorman in that spot? It's not an ideal spot. You don't like the lefty on lefty, but you know what? If he connects, I know he can do damage. Whereas when Vilade connects, if he connects, I don't know what that looks like.
It's also worth noting, like, Vilade had no future with this team. He was not going to be a guy that was going to stick around for the next few years. So, like, the runway conversation, for that to be such a big thing for the Cardinals, you know who might be here in the future? A guy like Thomas Sajaci. You know who else might be here in the future in this exact role? Just go out there and mash lefties. Luken Baker. Mm-hmm. He could have that role for you. So it is confusing. And I know what their answer would be, right? If I asked them, they would say, we needed the outfielder. We needed somebody that could go out there because Walker was the one that was placed on the IL. We would like somebody to have that 1-for-1 replacement. And I will say this as well. Vilade was hitting down at the minor league level. So
they tried the hot hand.
Yeah. They tried to go out there and say, hey, Vilade has been producing more at the minor league level than Thomas Sajaci has. Let's go to him first. And I don't know what the correct answer is on how much runway do you give to that guy that was performing at the minor league level, came up and got his teeth kicked in at the major league level. My answer is definitely this much. Like, whatever this amount is, we have reached that threshold where I'm comfortable saying, okay, it's probably just not going to happen this time. Maybe in the future it could, but this time it's not happening for Vilade. Let's try something different. It's now been, 2 weeks of this? Let's go ahead and give somebody else an opportunity here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I found it puzzling when they first decided to make that move. Now, with that being said, I also am the one that says when you've got a hot hand, you should call it up, like we were clamoring for Luken Baker last year for the St. Louis Cardinals. So, okay, I get it. But I also saw at the time, like, that you want to talk about runway. And I understand what their sentiment is. I agree with what you guys are saying of, like, well, if he wants a JC be an everyday player, where is that coming from? I agree with that. But if you are looking for, hey, he's got to get a quality amount of at-bats when he's up here, that was the perfect time to do it, right? You're running into a string of lefties. You can play him at second. You can bump out Donovan to the outfield. And then that also allows for the DH spot to still be manned by Ivan Herrera potentially. Or if you bring up Luken Baker, Baker can get that start. and also the fact that you're in a stretch of like 27 games in 28 days. So you were going to have to get some guys some days off. They've even talked about that publicly, like, hey, this is when we're going to be tested with our depth. I find it very puzzling because I think there was a role for both a guy that can help contribute in Thomas Ajacey, but also creating a little bit of runway for that player, and for Luke and Baker also to be a guy that can come off the bench and help provide you against lefties. And even if you said, hey, we're not going to concede on the argument for Thomas Ajacey, right? We want everyday opportunities. He's going to have that in the minor leagues. I'd say, okay, fine. I don't get it, but I will fold. Luke and Baker, if he comes up here and you just swap him 1-for-1 with Ryan Vilade, you actually now create a little bit more of a role for Ferrario, who right now gets one start in a month and then kind of serves as a pinch runner every now and then. So I think that Luke and Baker should at minimum be the one of the guys that is up here. That way you can churn through this bench. Because last night when they went to the pinch hitting role, I'm with you. I think Ollie pulled the right strings there.
Yeah, technically speaking.
I think he pulled the right strings by what he had available to him. I just knew they weren't going to get a hit in that spot, right? Everybody at the ballpark could feel it at that moment. You're going to Ryan Vilade. Sure, the numbers will tell you this is the right decision. You just don't feel comfortable with making that decision.
And it's one of those spots where if I'm an opposing manager, dude, I am attacking you like crazy. With that lineup that the Cardinals had last night, it goes Burleson, Gorman, Scott, Nootbaar, Wynn, Donovan. That lane right there, starting with Burleson, dude, I'm exclusively putting left-handed pitchers into the game. I have zero fear of these guys beating my dude, and I have even less fear of whoever you're going to put in. The one guy that may strike some fear for me is strangely Pozo. He's the guy that you could bring into the game. I'll be like, okay, well, that's a little interesting. I don't really know how this one's going to go
He's
for
a
us.
free swinger.
But they don't utilize him in this regard because they really value having that catcher coming off of the bench. They want to have that extra guy. And I can have my philosophical differences on this, but it is what it is. We know how Ollie manages. We know how he utilizes these guys in that specific role. So if you're in Mo's shoes, you also need to know that. You know how he utilizes that second catcher, or in this scenario, I suppose the third catcher technically last night, but Pajes did end up going into the game, so whatever, maybe they were planning for that. Whatever the case, if you know that as the GM/president of baseball operations, I need to construct the bench accordingly, so that way I have other pieces that he can utilize in those scenarios. Right-handed starter that day, I've got all of my lefties in the lineup. What's on the bench? Well, last night it was a whole bunch of nothing that you could utilize, because you're not going to Pozo. Pajes is there specifically for his defense in that situation. You have two guys that you can actually utilize off of the bench. It's Vilade and it's Barrero. Barrero doesn't take at-bats for this team. He exclusively comes in occasionally, very rarely, but occasionally for a pinch runner and or defense situation after they have utilized everybody else that can come in off the bench. And Valado's the only guy that you really have. They've got to do something. I hope that we see some kind of a move today. I'm guessing we won't. Typically, you see something like this at like the end of a series. But I feel like last night there was a clear lesson to be learned. They need to do something about this bench. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, NFL Quick Hitters is next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk Classic Air Care, the company that has been making people comfortable since 1926. And you need the proper care for your HVAC system. Whether it's old, whether it's brand new, you want to make sure it lasts you as long as you can get out of it. And that's where Classic Air Care comes into play. Whether it's the maintenance agreement, whether you purchase one from them and you get the financing options for your HVAC system, it could be something as little as signing up for their furnace filter program, to where they send you a furnace filter every month to your door that reminds you, hey, you should change that one to make sure that it's taking care of that HVAC system. But they've got a 5-star review, 4.8 rating, over 2,500 Google reviews talking about Classic Air Care's work and their technicians, like this one from Derek. Classic Air Care took incredible care of us and even showed us a few things to watch out for when we're taking care of our HVAC system. Frank was the best. He's super friendly. I highly recommend them. So schedule your appointment with Classic Air Care today. Check out the maintenance agreement. I urge you to sign up for it to get the longest tenure out of that HVAC system. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. That's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, we've spent a decent amount of time talking about Ryan Helsley today, and just the volatility in general of relievers has been a big part of that conversation. Alex, I would say the same is true of cornerbacks, and the guy that is the face of this right now in the NFL is Jair Alexander. Formerly with the Packers, he was there for 7 seasons, a former first-round pick for them, was a really good corner at one point in time, got a big extension from them accordingly, and now he's gone. Partially because he's a bit of a knucklehead, it seems like, kind of a difficult personality to have in your locker room, and also partially because his performance just has not been up to snuff, and he's been hurt a lot over the last couple of seasons. Alex, what do you guys think are the most volatile positions in sports? I would say reliever is probably number 1 on the list. Running back, maybe 2. Is corner 3? Is there anything else that you would put at number 3?
I'd put one above running back, too, that I thought of. Goalie. I think goalies in the NHL are such a volatile industry.
Man, I thought about that when we were talking in the office, but the problem is, like, it's volatile if you're like a middle backup goalie. Like, if you're an average goalie, you've got a job pretty, like, Jake Allen is a perfect example. Like, he's just been a really fine goalie his entire career, and he's been in the league for 20 years. Like, I think it's volatile, like the superstars, like your great one, like Jake Ottinger. You're viewed as the next big thing, and then it goes the next day. The other hockey one I was thinking of was goal scorers. Like, Patrick Laine, to me, is the perfect example of a guy that he could be a 50-goal scorer or a 20-goal scorer.
Oh,
like,
that's interesting.
It's rare you find the consistent 40 to 50 goal scorers. Like, I'm looking back at, like, previous years. Tage Thompson scored 47 goals a couple of years ago. This past year, he scored, 31?
I would say that is more, to me, ground ball, high average player in baseball.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent.
I can see that. Chris Kreider scored 52 4 years ago.
Yeah. I didn't buy that
Like,
one.
and maybe the position's power forward because Zach Hyman scored 50-plus goals last
There you
year,
go.
and then this year he was like third,
It's not
25.
the puck bounced to you.
Yeah,
enough.
because when
Jake
I was thinking goal scorer, I was thinking like more of like and maybe this is the same thing. I was thinking more of like they're streaky, not volatile. I think power forward though. I think you're 100% right.
Alex
That's
DeBrincat,
probably it.
32 goals 1 year.
Remember
Next
when we
year,
talked
40.
about him compared to
Kyrou.
Jordan Kyrou? We had all those discussions. That was fun. Who'd you take now?
Neither.
Kyrou. What? Whoa.
I'd take Kyrou.
Yeah, we'd all take Kyrou, right? We're all on the same page there.
BK likes to flaunt when he's right. He just tries to pass over the
occasionally
fact
I'm
when he's
right.
wrong.
I mean, a lot of the time I'm wrong. A
He's
lot
Suter,
of
he's
the time
wrong.
I'm
Both
wrong.
of you are wrong, but that's fine.
You should celebrate this moment. I've been wrong a lot so far this year.
A lot of us
Wynn's
have.
not a 2-hole header.
A lot of us have been
Oh,
wrong.
man, remember the Donovan one? Donovan's not a 3-hole hitter, which you still believe.
Kyle Tucker's not a superstar.
I still wait. That one I'm tired of hearing about.
My brother-in-law, I think he's one of the best baseball minds that I know. He said the Donovan thing the other night when we were at the baseball game together, and I was like, no, you
slapped him.
can't believe this.
Great baseball people think alike.
He's such a modern thinker. He's great on the
So am
history
I.
of the sport, and
I'm
all
not
of these different things. And he's like, man, Donovan, I just look at that and I was like, dude, he's hitting 320 with pop. What do you mean he's not a 3-hole hitter? What more do you want?
Air Comfort Service text line is
crazy.
absolutely correct. The Cardinals outfielder is volatile.
Dude, you ain't lying on that.
You go out there for one couple years and it's gone pretty
100%.
quick.
So what would you say our rankings are? Number 1 is reliever. We're all in agreement there.
I would still put
Show rankings.
I'd still put running back 2.
I'd say 2 is running back. 3, do we agree 3 is corner?
I would say goalie's 3. I
Goalie
think
3?
the goalie.
Would you put goalie over power forward? Because I'd put power forward over goalie.
I'd put goalie over power forward.
yeah, I think I
Because
would
those
too.
guys you're mentioning are still good.
Yeah.
They just don't produce at the same level. There are goalies that go on a hot streak and
Like
then they're done.
What was that guy? The Hamburglar, who was awesome for Ottawa for a playoff run, and then he was out of hockey within 2 years.
Yeah, it's not wrong. Like I said, I just feel like the common denominator are the average goalies that last about 7 or 8 years. It's rare you see those guys of Hamburglar or the dude from Pittsburgh, Matt Murray, who was good for 3 years and then disappeared. Typically, you've got the same goalies in the NHL, but I'll defer to you guys on that one.
And part of the reason I say that, too, because I think you're right. There are more of the middle ground guys that do that. Even like Binnington, for example. He's great when you get to the postseason. He's got a little volatility to his game as well. Because
He's
when
the
I
Kike Hernandez.
Yeah, when I look at his regular seasons, he's good. And I'm not denying that. I'm not taking that away from him. There's also stretches where, should they, put a hoot?
Yeah, but there's Jock Peterson.
But they're always, but even Binnington, he lasts because he's that. He's average in the regular season, but then he can take it to the next level. And I feel like if we're talking volatility of positions, we're talking about guys.
I just figured it out.
We're talking about guys that are good and then are gone. Because bullpen arms are here. T-Bone's been pointing this out all season. Look at the amount of guys who were studs 2 years ago that are DFA'd out of baseball. That's where I feel like we're talking volatility, which is why I don't know if I put goalie there.
Can we look at the All-Stars from 2022 real quick? I just would, out of curiosity.
On,
who
the reliever?
relievers were. Yeah.
Well, I think Bednar was there, and he's been better this year. He finally bounced
Let's
back.
just go through the pitchers. You ready for this?
This is going to be brutal.
This is on the American League side of things. Pitchers, this is 2022. We've played 2 baseball seasons since then. This is the 3rd baseball season since these players. Shane McClanahan, hurt ever since.
Yeah.
Justin Verlander.
Old.
Alex, your boy, Alek Manoah.
Oh.
I still
Nestor
would take a chance on him.
Cortez. Garrett Cole, hurt. Shohei Ohtani, hurt. Paul Blackburn. He's available. I think
he's
he
been
was
good.
hurt, though.
Yeah.
Martin Perez hasn't been the same ever since. Framber
He's hurt.
Valdez. Framber Valdez still very good. Relievers, Clay Holmes, Emmanuel Clase, who blew up early this season. Jorge Lopez, who I don't know if he's in baseball
He
anymore.
just got DFA'd by, I think, the Nationals.
Gregory Soto, Liam Hendricks, who's losing his mind this year, and Jordan Romano. On the National League side of things, here are your pitchers. You ready? Sandy Alcantara. Corbin Burns. Joe Musgrove.
What I'm learning is
Max Fried.
What I'm learning is
Okay.
don't pay pitchers.
Tony Gonsolin.
He just got put on the IL.
Luis Castillo, but he's on a different team.
He's been good, though.
Clayton Kershaw, he's 100. He really doesn't like it when you play a video of Matt Adams hitting home run
Bush
against
League.
him. Carlos Rodon, Tyler Anderson, Miles Michaelis.
I forgot he was an all-star. He's been good this year.
Miles Michaelis is actually the picture of health versus all of those other pitchers.
And then on the reliever side of things for the National League, guys are a little better on this side. Josh Hader, Edwin Diaz, Ryan Helsley, David Bednar, he's blown up.
He's bounced back though.
Joe Mantiply,
He
was DFA, wasn't he?
Yeah, he might be in the
and
minors.
Devin Williams, who has not been good. He had not been good early on. I haven't checked his numbers recently, but yeah, if that doesn't remind you
Devin
of
Williams is the wildest one to me because, like, watching him in the playoffs last year, it's like, dude, you've got one pitch, and if that one pitch doesn't work, you're not getting anybody out.
Yeah.
that was 2022.
Ooh, fun times, man.
Don't pay pitchers.
Who were you in 2022?
Who was I?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, what was
Things
I doing?
change, man.
I didn't have a child at that point.
I had one.
I was just married. We had just bought a house in
Less Tony.
the year before.
Sometimes
I
you
don't
change
think
in
that's
2
true,
years.
actually.
No.
I think he was
I think
less
we've
Tony.
just gotten less.
Maybe we
less
were-
wanting to
I
deal
think
with
22 was when I ran my marathon.
it. Weird. Flex.
Not doing that again.
Yeah, now he's yoked. He's working on his carbs to make sure he's not.
He's sober
I
curious.
think at that point in time, it was you, me, and...
No, we were
Jamie
21.
I was
on.
here.
Yeah, we were 21.
Because that was the Pulse year. I think that was like my first full year.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
were
Albert Pujols
21.
was here.
Yeah, the three of us took over.
Yeah.
We've been almost 4 years together.
Well, that's
I was
changed.
21 or 22.
I think you guys liked me a little bit more at that point in time. Low bar to
maybe.
clear, but I think you liked me a little more.
You were
Not-
tolerable then.
I'm
Now
thinking
you're
it's
just not
Not a
tolerable.
whole lot has changed for me since then.
no?
No?
No.
Still got a map of the U.S. on
That's
your
kind
apartment
of
wall?
I don't know if that was up there yet, but that was added.
I had one
kinda
kid. That was my life.
Depressing.
You have 100 now.
I do. No money.
Yeah, dude, I know all
That
about
one, that one's still true for all of us.
That changes for everybody, right?
Alex and I are getting more alike by the day.
I told you were going to get here at some point, man.
Big part of it is the medical expenses. Dude, going to the doctor is expensive. We don't have to talk about that.
I just don't check the mailbox anymore. Katie's like, I got the mail, and I'm like, cool, you figure that out. I don't want to
If we
open
don't
that.
see it, we don't have to pay it, right?
Yeah. Medical bills, I just don't look at.
Are the Cardinals in need of a lineup shuffle? And what should the Cardinals do with their current center field situation, if anything? We'll talk about it all coming up here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals fell to the Blue Jays last night 5-4 in extra innings. They are back in action tonight. Game 2 of their 3-game set with Toronto. 6:45 is first pitch. Chris Bassett will be on the mound for the Blue Jays. Miles Michaelis will be on the hill for St. Louis. The Sports Center is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, a Daikin heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, are the Cardinals in need of a lineup reshuffle? It's something that I would say has been bandied about at a minimum and demanded at most over on social media. Alex, people are upset with Lars Nootbaar. This is what happens, right? He goes through a bit of a slump. They've gone up against a ton of lefties lately. This has not been an easy stretch for him. Dude, he's going up against lefties and splitters.
No.
What do you want? This is not the time where Lars Nootbaar is going to have a ton of success. I personally was not anticipating that, but it is what it is. Slugging percentage has now dropped below 400 this season. And his batting average, which I know people get very mad about with him on even a good day, it's down to 235 after last night. Do they need to make a change, Alex, in your opinion? They're going through more right-handed pitchers now, so I like Lars Nootbaar at the top of the lineup personally, but are you somebody that believes they should be looking at switching things up with the lineup right now?
No, because what you just said, over his last 15 games or so is where he's really kind of gone through his struggles.
Yeah, I mean, you could go back to like the last 30. It hasn't been good for Lars Nootbaar basically since the start of May.
So just go off of the last month, let's say that's where he's been struggling.
215 batting average, 288 on base, and a 619 OPS since the start of May.
You know where the Cardinals rank in terms of batting average, on base percentage, slug percentage? Well, not slug percentage because that's not that pretty, but OPS in general. They're top 10. Yeah. So, no, I'm not changing anything because guess what? Despite Lars Nootbaar going, 0 for 5 last night in the game against Toronto with 2 strikeouts, the team still scored 4 runs and was in that baseball game. This is a lineup that doesn't rely on 2 people to where if those guys go cold, this team falls apart. They've got guys that when one goes quiet, the others pick them up, whether it's Wynn or Herrera or Donovan or Contreras. When you lose a Nootbaar or you lose a Victor Scott and they're not hitting it the way they were, well, then there's 3 other guys that step up for this one. This lineup is about 6-7 deep. So, no, I'm not changing anything right now. If this team continues to score 4 or 5 runs a game with Lars Nootbaar going 0 for 5 and hitting 237, I'm fine.
Yeah, I would be open-minded to it, but the thing that I'm coming back to is I just don't know who I'm moving up there. And that's where I just settle on, you know what, I'm going to stick with Nootbaar through his struggles then, with his issues right now through the last month and a half. I think you'll eventually see him get out of it. It's a little weird. He's not drawing walks as much anymore, but I think that is something that will change for him. I just don't see what your alternative would be, right? Like, I don't want to move Donovan up to the leadoff spot, though he would profile well there. I don't want to take Wynn out of the 2-hole because, I mean, he's Babe Ruth in that spot. And then Herrera and Contreras, you're not moving up into the leadoff, and Arenado's not there. Like, and Scott's gone cold, right?
Burleson. Put Burleson up there. That's what people would say. Look at the average, 295.
Get Goldschmidt back. Put him up there.
I wanted the idea of Goldie leading off for like 3 years, final 3 years he was here. But
can you imagine if Ollie was like, you know what, believe it, Gorman, you're up at the top. Let's get some damage up at the top of the order.
We would have problems there.
I think it'd be awesome.
I mean, Burleson would be the ideal. Like, he does not have the style that you would typically expect at the top of your order, right? He does not walk, and he is not a guy that like is any kind of a threat on the base paths. But he does get on base at a decent clip because of the average. If you wanted to capture lightning in the bottle, he's probably the guy. But I like him lower in the order because he's also somebody that I trust with runners in scoring position, and that's not something you're getting as much when you're at the top.
I think if Scott wasn't going through it, like if you had Scott playing like he did in the first month, I think maybe you try that, where you're getting a guy that's getting on base a little bit, hitting for average, also has the threat of being able to steal a bag. Now, I don't know where you'd put Newt in that situation because I wouldn't move him all the way down to 9. But Scott's going through it right now. So I would just stick with Nootbaar. I would just kind of stick through the struggles right now. At some point, he will turn this back around when you see more right-handed pitchers, when you see those guys instead of dealing with these lefties and these right-handers that have these dominant splitters. So I don't think I would change the lineup. I think I would stick with the status quo for right now.
Part of that lineup is Victor Scott. And you want to talk about a guy that's going through it. He's, one for his last, 21?
I think it's 2 for his last 38 or something like that.
It's been bad. So much so that we're seeing him do some of the things that we saw him do early last year, where he's just up there trying to get a bunt down for a base hit. And that's when you know things are not going well for Vic, is when he's getting into that mode. I say just keep doing what you're doing. Keep putting him out there every single day. Let's see what it looks like. If it doesn't end this season well and we find out, hey, he's just like a well below league average hitter, so be it. What does he add to you offensively with his base running? What does he add to you defensively in center field? I know fast lane. We'll probably see Carey running down the studio here pretty soon. They hate the wins above replacement numbers, but it does encapsulate sometimes what you're doing to help a team win, the value beyond just the offensive metrics. Dude, Victor Scott does stuff that helps the Cardinals win on a consistent basis. He catches the ball really well in center field. He has 17 stolen bases already this season. He's on pace for almost 40, despite all of the lack of on-base percentage stuff.
It's a T-bone 3.
I'm putting him out there every single day. Let's see what it looks like. If you want a day off here and there, cool, especially against a left-handed pitcher. I've got no problem with that. You got to fix the bench to do that, but we'll get to that another day. Otherwise, yeah, if there's a right-handed pitcher on the mound, that dude is out there for me.
I'm not changing anything with this roster right now. Until they go on a significant losing streak where it is damaging their season, then we can talk changes. We haven't seen this yet. So, yeah, Victor Scott is not coming out of my lineup, nor is he going to go figure things out in Memphis, because he's playing gold glove defense and winning you baseball games in center field. And guess what? Runway is also learning how to play at the major league level.
100%.
Victor Scott is figuring out how to play at the major league level right now. This is Lars Nootbaar's first full season without injuries in what feels like 4 years. He's figuring things out right now. He's going through it. Everybody goes through this. Figure out what you got in your players, because if Victor Scott can dig himself out of this tunnel that he's in, you're better for it. Keep him up here. Don't change a damn thing.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I am confident, or maybe not confident. I feel like he's going to get out of this slump, right? I think this is that learning process here at the big league level. And to your point of what he's bringing to the team, and look, I push back on where I think it values defense a little too heavily, but I do think it is telling for him. Like when you look at Baseball Reference for his WAR, he's tied for second on the team. Donovan's the only one ahead of him, and then he's tied with Sonny Gray. And I think that goes to show you his defense. And last year, they didn't get any production out of center field. Let's just be honest about what the production was at center field. And he was a little bit of part of that, but he was a young kid. Wouldn't have been on the active roster if it weren't for just dire circumstance with the injuries at the beginning of the year. He's playing Michael Ciani's level of defense right now. And as long as you're doing that, you're still going to have a role on this team. And to your point, he's providing something on the base paths as well. When he does get on, he is taking an extra base, and he is a guy that can potentially get to 40 stolen bases if he can get on base enough.
You guys want to play a lineup game real quick? Not the actual lineup game. It's not out yet. We're not spoiling anything for you. But somebody on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. I've not listened to this just yet, but Brian says Newt is out of the lineup today. I'll be interested to see who leads off. Ollie apparently mentioned that in his interview today with the Gas House Gang. So Chris Bassett is a right-handed pitcher. He's starting today for the Toronto Blue Jays. He does have significant splits this year.
That's wild.
Left-handed hitters are batting .291 with a .785 OPS against Bassett on the season. Righties are batting .245 with a .667 OPS. So you want as many lefties as you can get in the lineup, and you probably want them hitting as high as possible. This is not a one-off. Last year, lefties hit .305 with a near 900 OPS against Bassett. Righties hit .235 with a near 600 OPS against Bassett. So it's a massive gap between the two sides. My guess is they probably put Donovan at the top and put Burleson batting third. That's my guess on what you do here. Do you guys think they go in a different direction?
I think you're right. The other direction I would go is I would do Burleson leadoff.
I think you consider it.
Dude, I saw it on the pregame show yesterday. He's mashing the baseball lately. And if we're talking about these splits here, yeah, I'd put Burleson at leadoff because I'm not going to take Wynn out. And frankly, I'd prefer not to take Donovan out. The guy's putting together an MVP-esque season in the 3-hole. Don't change what's not broken. And then you can just go righty-righty from there. So, yeah, I would go Burleson.
My guess is you go Donovan 1, Wynn 2, Burleson 3, Contreras, Herrera, Arenado, and then you have Gorman at 7 in Burleson's typical spot, and then Pages and Scott. That's my guess on what they do tonight. And you'll have Gorman at second, Donovan and
left,
Burleson in the outfield, and you kind of make it work.
Wait, who's our DH? Did we skip a DH?
I also wonder.
Tonight you'd have Herrera at DH.
That's right.
I also wonder if they move Herrera to 3 and then just put Burleson at 5.
You could do that.
Yeah.
You could do that.
Coming off of Herrera's.
Donovan 1, Herrera 3, and then you
Burley
just have
5.
The reason I wouldn't is because of the lefty splits against Bassett. I want to take advantage of those as much as humanly possible. But yeah, I mean, Herrera is good against anybody, so I'll just take my best against your best. I could see that scenario as well.
Yeah, I'm guessing they go with. I would think Donovan up top, and then they put Burley at the 3 or 4, one of those two spots. If they put Burley up at leadoff, I mean, I would get it, right? I mean, to your point, he's swinging a hot bat, and like he's not the most slide-of-foot base runner. He is a smart base runner, right?
Yeah.
And you can take advantage of that.
Don't need to worry about being a base runner for when you're hitting bombs down to the center.
Wait, is that why we're thinking Gorman up top?
No.
Oh.
No.
All right, somebody on the text line says, BK, quickly tell the listeners why, and they capitalize why, you're wrong on Nootbaar and how overrated he is. I don't know why I would do that, but in the event that I did.
I like the tone, though.
If you think Lars Nootbaar is overrated, is because you don't value on-base percentage. And I'm not telling you should or shouldn't. I personally believe that you should. But if you think that he is an overrated baseball player, it's because he doesn't slug, he doesn't hit for average, and those are the two metrics that a lot of people immediately look at. Why? Because average has always been the thing that we look at, and slugging percentage is like the traditional metrics, right? Homers, RBIs, average. Those are the three things that would show up on the back of the baseball card. He's not somebody that wins in that way. He's different. He is a very modern player. He does not strike out a lot, but he also does not hit for a high average. He gets on base a ton. He walks a lot. That is a really valuable thing, specifically when you're batting leadoff. So I do think that he is a very valuable player. I think he's a guy that is a plus defender. He's a plus base runner. He is a plus hitter at the plate. He's going through a significant slump right now. We will see sooner rather than later, I would assume, one of those hot streaks. He just came out of a hot streak. I think in the month of April, he was pretty hot. Now he's cold. So you live with that, and whenever he gets hot again, we'll probably be talking once again about, well, what do you do? Is this a guy that you potentially keep around for the long term? Lars Nootbaar is a valuable player. I think the ceiling on what you see with that, it's an eye of the beholder situation, but he's a good player.
As Katy Perry once told us, you're hot, then you're cold. You're yes, then you're no.
Coming up next, the Rewind here on 101 ESPN.
Up, then you're down.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We just stumbled onto something in the during the break. Dude, league-wide, three-hole hitters are just not slugging. This season, three-hole hitters overall are slugging like .435. It's one of the lowest slugging percentage by three-hole hitters that we've seen in recent memory. Over the last 25 years, if you look at the four lowest slugging percentage seasons, they're the most recent 4 seasons that you have seen. As something that maybe we'll talk about as we continue along here, kind of big picture-wise, what this season means for Major League Baseball and how the Cardinals are represented within that trend, because it does feel as though they're kind of following it. I don't know if it's the tail wagging the dog or if they're the ones that are kind of leading the charge on this change, but it's interesting, if nothing else.
Lower the mound.
No, we need more power.
No, lower the mound.
That's amazing.
Lower
All
the
right.
mound.
Cardinals back in action tonight. Chris Bassett versus Miles Michaelis. Two guys that are like very specific in the way that they go about things. Honestly, two guys that a few years ago were very similar in the way they went about things. We talked about Chris Bassett as a really interesting free agent option for the Cardinals, and looking back, that would have been a very good signing for the Cardinals.
Trade candidate last year, too. Weren't we talking about him and Gossman from Toronto?
There was a point in time where that was the case when they stunk, but they decided not to go sell the way that we all kind of hoped that they would. Alex, how do you think this one goes? Cardinals looking for a bounce back after the disappointing result last night, although they played a solid game overall, just blew it up in the 9th and 10th inning. How are you feeling going into this one, Michaelis versus Bassett?
I mean, I always feel good about this team because of their offense. I will say, like, it's interesting because we talked earlier, like, I don't think Helsley's going to be an option for them going into this game tonight. And Miles Michaelis is a guy that has pitched well for you, but the back end of your bullpen is going to look different tonight versus what it did last night. So I just expect this offense to always go out there and keep it competitive. The pitching side of this will be intriguing for how lethal it seems the offense is. And Dan Shulman, who was with us earlier, said Alejandro Kirk right now might be the most feared hitter in baseball. You're going to have to go up against that type of offense. So it'll be an interesting test for Miles Michaelis, who's pitched well. What does your bullpen look like at the back end of this game? That's the part that'll be intriguing.
Yeah, Michael's been good since May, so I kind of expect the same thing from him. I'll be curious if the offense can get to Bassett. I mentioned this when we talked about, like, hey, did you see the comeback happening last night? Did you feel comfortable that the Cardinals could find a way to make it interesting? And the answer was yes, but they had no answer for Berrios. So I'll be curious to see if they can find a way to find an answer on the starter before getting to that Blue Jays bullpen. And to your point, I'll be curious to see how they manage the back part of this game if they've got a lead, because I'm assuming Helsley's down. And if he is, now things get a little bit more interesting. Maybe Maton threw a little bit last night. I'd think he'd be good to go. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they manage like the 8th and 9th innings if you have a lead in this one.
I'm not sure if Maton would be available or not. It would be 4 out of 6 for him. It would be 4 out of 6 for Ryan Helsley as well. I'm assuming O'Brien is down today as well. So you're probably looking at Matz, Leahy, John King, JoJo Romero, and Roycroft as the 5 guys that are potentially available to you out of the bullpen going into this one.
We need 8.
Yeah, so it'll be a big game for Miles Michaelis. He's been quite good at home so far this season. You're hoping for another quality start out of him. This is not an easy lineup to do that against. I think that the Cardinals will find a way to win this one. I think it'll be a relatively low-scoring affair, 4-3. Cardinals get a win tonight against the Toronto Blue Jays. We will certainly be breaking that down in its entirety tomorrow. We will be joined tomorrow as well by Jeremy Rutherford and Chris Kerber going up against a Cardinals day game. Going to have a lot of fun with that. So we will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. For Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. The Fast Lane has you taken care of from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.